Hello, I'm gonna be reading Lucid Dreams finally. I will, um, you know, eventually get this done. This is very long. Okay, I'll start. September 7th. Chapter 1. September 7th, 1975. Marauder's Room. How was your first day as Captain, Prongs? Sirius asked, sprawled on his bed, his head hanging off the end of the bed. Amazing. We're preparing for a game against the Ravenclaw team, James hums. Remus perks up at the mention of Ravenclaw team and decides to pay close attention to the conversation. His sudden interest doesn't go unnoticed by his friends. When is it? Remus asked, trying to act nonchalant. Sirius and James see right through it. Are you planning on cheering for your favorite captain? James asked jokingly, making Remus huff and cross his arms, knowing that they won't hesitate to tease him about his 2-year-long crush. Unless her name is suddenly Lorelli, it's certainly not you, Peter says teasingly, and James snickers in amusement. Very funny. I was just trying to show interest in your hobbies, Prongs, Remus says defensively, knowing well enough that they won't believe it. He tries to pretend like he stopped paying attention by going back to his assignments. It's coming Friday. Will you be available, Moody? James asked, making Remus roll his eyes. Although he was annoyed that his friends were constantly teasing, he smiled softly, looking forward to this coming Friday. He never had the chance to talk to her. She was a year above him, so she didn't share any classes with him, and she'd spend her time mostly for friends or practicing for Quidditch, which meant that he'd simply admire her from afar. Sometimes, if he was lucky in the Great Hall, they'd walk past each other and she'd smile at him. I think he'll definitely clear his schedule, Sirius retorts, making James snort. You know, for someone who keeps getting rejected, you have a big mouth, Remus points out, making James smile. James's smile drop and Sirius laugh. Peter wincing with an amused smile. Remus was a little envious of James. Even though he kept getting rejected by his crush, he had the courage to talk to her and go as far as asking her out. Of course, it never actually worked out for him, but he had an advantage that Remus could only dream to have. Sensitive subject, why would you bring that up? James asked dramatically, and Remus chuckled, shaking his head at him. I feel bad for you two, hopelessly in love with someone who either dislikes you or someone who doesn't even know you exist. Sirius hums, making the two look at him. And you'd be an expert in this? Sirius asked, leaning forward, interested in what Sirius could possibly say. Of course, the ladies love me, Remus smirks, making James shake his head and Remus roll his eyes. He knew that Sirius wasn't completely wrong about that. Most of the girls did love Sirius. Sirius's brooding, mysterious look. Sirius and James could easily get any girl they wanted. Of course, Jane was too in love with Lily Evans to even care. But the Gryffindor team star player, he had the attention. But as the Gryffindor team star player, he had the attention of every other girl. Maybe you should give Moody and Prongs a few tips, Peter jokes, and Sirius smirks as he switches positions to sitting on the edge of bed. Easy. James, first step, stop seeming so desperate. Remus, first step, talk to her. Sirius says firmly, and Remus shakes his head. I could never. Why would you want to talk to me? Remus says, rhetorically, making Sirius shake his head disapprovingly. That's not the right attitude. You won't get anywhere if you think like that. You should be wondering why she would not talk to you, Sirius instructs him, and Remus just shakes his head again. Not happening. I think I'll just stay on the sidelines. Remus hums, causing James to shake his head. No way. This is the first year that we will put you on the field. This is the first year that we will put you on the field front line. You will get the girl, James says firmly, and Remus doesn't believe him as he raises an eyebrow. Will you get the girl, James? Remus asks, making James huff and shake his head. You're a twat, Mooney, James grumbles, making Remus chuckle and Sirius snicker. Part 2, September 10th, 1975, Quidditch match. Remus follows his extremely excited friends across the stands, trying to find a spot to sit down. He was obviously just as excited as them, but Sirius was more visual about it as he exclaimed happily for James, who wasn't even there. The match would be starting anytime soon. Okay, everyone, your task today is to cheer extremely loudly for your team captain, Sirius shouted loudly to all the Gryffindors sitting there. Remus shakes his head in amusement, sitting down next to Peter. And then you're all invited to the after party when they win in the commons. Sit down, Padfoot, Remus chuckles, pulling Sirius down. You can't be so certain that they'll win. I know you're in love with the other team's captain. Going as far as doubting your best friend's skill? That's low, Mooney. Sirius shakes his head dramatically, and Remus rolls his eyes. It's not what I meant, and you know it, Remus hums, making Sirius grin and shake his head. Anyways, let's focus. It's about to start. Afraid you'll miss your girl's entrance? Peter starts teasingly, causing Remus to huff as he checks as his cheeks taint soft shade of pink. Oh, look, Wormtail, he's blushing, Sirius coos, and Remus glares at him in annoyance. Shut it, the two of you, Remus says, looking towards the field at his two friends laugh. The Ravenclaw students suddenly start cheering as their team flies out on their brooms. Remus leans forward, searching for one person that he really wanted to see. Sirius notice him searching relentlessly and chuckles softly, before nudging him and pointing towards where he had spotted her. Remus tries not to get flustered by the fact that Sirius had known exactly what he was thinking. His focus sets on her, and like every time he sees her, his breath is caught at the back of his throat. She was by one of the goalposts, her hair pulled up in a ponytail. Her usual warm smile was replaced by a serious look. His attention is pulled away from her as his friends suddenly start cheering, signaling to him that the Gryffindor team had joined. He quickly jumped to his feet as well, cheering for his best friend, who waves at them with the widest grin. James winks in their direction with a smirk, making Remus glance over to his shoulder to see Lily Evans standing a few rows above them. Do you think he was waving at us or her? Remus wonders, making Sirius glance over his shoulder and snicker. No, Mooney. Are you cheering for him or L'Oreal? L'Oreal, Sirius asks, jokingly, making Remus hit him playfully. Oh, shut it, Remus grumbles, focusing back on the game. He watches as the players get in position. L'Oreal and James facing off, both being seekers. The snitch is set loose, making both seekers keep an eye on it. Then the quaffle is thrown up, signaling the beginning of the game. Everyone watches with anticipation as the chasers throw quaffle around, hoping to score. Want to bet on who will catch the snitch? Sirius asks Remus, knowing well enough that he wouldn't be able to choose. You really do enjoy this, don't you? Remus asks, glaring at him, and Sirius snickers, shrugging endlessly. It's free entertainment, Peter points out, making Remus roll his eyes at them. Remus goes back to watching the match, seeing a Gryffindor chaser throw a quaffle into one of the hoops, making them cheer. Out of nowhere, Bludgeard starts flying around wildly, attacking players at random. Panicked, Panicked whispers start to echo through the stands as a rogue bludger nearly hits two players once or twice. Remus starts to look worried, looking for a sign of any of his seekers, seeing them chasing the snitch, not noticing bludger. This is most definitely not good. Sirius breathes out, his eyes widen. Shouldn't something be done about this? Peter asks, but Remus shakes his head. Stopping the game won't stop a bludger, and we can't hex it. There's a risk of hitting all the players. Remus answers, leaning forward. His heart was beating extremely fast, and he felt extremely worried. He watches as the snitch suddenly disappears from inside of both sneakers, making James stop. Remus's mouth goes dry as he notices a bludger flying at full speed towards his clueless best friend. Before it can hit him, a sudden flash of blue pushes him aside. Remus watches with wide eyes as the bludger hits Lorelli's broomstick, breaking him. His heart drops when he watches her fall, jumping to his feet. Remus pushes past everyone, leaving the stands and rushing down. Sirius and Peter give each other a look, chasing after him. As they reach the field, they notice professors already there and players flying down. James rushed to join his friends, his eyes wide as he holds his broomstick. "Are you okay?" Remus asked James. And glancing toward where professors are hurtled up, he noticed Lorelli's friends running towards them from the other side. "I'm fine," James assures him. "Let's go check on Lorelli." James doesn't have to say it twice as Remus makes his way towards where they all are hurtled up. His friends close behind him. They got closer. Emily and Leslie look up at them. "You okay, Potter?" Emily asked. Her eyes clouded with worry, and James nods. "I'm fine. How's Lorelli?" James asked. "Oh, just a broken leg. Nothing too special." They turned to look down at Lorelli, who's laying on the floor. "You're lucky that you two weren't flying any higher and that you landed on the sand floor," Professor Flitwick says, worried for one of his students. "You owe me a butterbeer for saving your life, Potter," Lorelli says, and James smirks as an idea comes to his mind. "We'll have to rain check on that, but Remus could take you," James suggests, making Remus's eyes widen. Lorelli turns to look back at him. "Can't complain. Give me a few days to recover, Lupin, then I'm coming for you," Lorelli says, just as Madame Pomfrey arrives. Sure, looking forward." Remus started getting flustered. He couldn't believe that he was currently talking to her, and even less as she knew his name. "Awesome. Well, hasta la vista, my loves. And by the way, James, I would have caught that snitch," Lorelli explains, "but she's being taken away." "Yeah, whatever makes you feel better." Part 3. September 11th, 1975. Gryffindor Commons. Remus walked down the stairs to the Commons, a bunch of chocolate in his hands. He was planning on giving it to Lorelli, who was currently recovering from a fall in the hospital room. He wanted to let her know he was grateful for what he had done for his best friend. The full moon isn't for another few days. What are you doing with all that chocolate?" Peter asked, noticing him walk past. Peter, Sirius, and James are all seated near the fireplace in the Commons. "I'm just hungry," Remus lies, knowing that if he ever told him the real reason, he'd never hear the end of it. "We just had lunch," Sirius points out, raising an eyebrow suspiciously. "Werewolf stamina, It makes me really hungry," Remus hums, trying to find an excuse, but it's clear that they obviously don't believe him. "Sure, why do I have a feeling you're about to see a certain seeker?" Sirius asked, and Remus' eyes widen. "I can see James right here," Remus asked, receiving a blank response. "Mooney, just a minute. You're going to see Lorelli," James says, and Remus huffs, knowing there is no real point in denying anymore. "Whatever, I'm just dropping these off anyway, just to say thank you," Remus huffs, making them all snicker as he walks away. His cheeks are a light shade of pink as he made his way out of Commons. He makes his way to the hospital wing, deciding that he'll just drop off the chocolate and then leave. As he reaches the big door to the hospital wing, he slowly pushes them open, popping his head in. He notices Madame Pomfrey. She looks up and smiles at him. "Remus, what brings you here?" she asks him, and he smiles sheepishly. "I just wanted to drop this off," he says as he walks in, using his foot to close the door. He glances toward where L'Oreal is laying, reading a book, and Madame Pomfrey smiles knowingly. Before nodding for him to go ahead, he makes his way toward where L'Oreal is, catching her attention. "Lupin, I wasn't expecting you here," she smiles happily, putting her book down. "Sorry, I just wanted to give you these as a thank you. I didn't really know which you like, so I brought all sorts." He hums as he puts down the chocolate on the table, which is adorned by flowers. "Oh, thank you, that's so sweet." She blushes and beams happily, making him blush as well. "It's a pleasure," he hums, backing away a little. "Well, I'll see you around then. I wish you a quick recovery." Remus? She says, stopping him from leaving as he looks at her questioningly. She smiles and pats aside his bed, signaling for him to sit down. "I'm not going to be able to finish all that chocolate alone. Stay." "Oh," he breathes out, not having expected her to say that. She notices his shocked face and chuckle. I'm half Vila, not half vampire. I don't bite," she jokes, making his eyes wide in shock. "I don't, oh, no, it's not that, she cuts him off, giggling at his flustered reaction. "Pulling your leg, Lupin. Now sit your arse down and pass me some of that," she says, making him low and breathy chuckle. He takes a seat on the edge of a bed and hands her some of the chocolate. "You know, for someone who is friends with people that pull on extravagant pranks, you're quite shy." You know about that?" he asks as she gives him a look as she unwraps the chocolate. Merlin's beard. Of course, it's kind of hard. Although it's always black and Potter. I always wonder why they always come with those ideas. She hums and he responds, and he smiles sheepishly. I'd say 50% of the time it's me," he admits, making her eyes widen with an amusement smile. "I get it now. Behind all the shyness is a mischievous genius," L'Oreal teases, and he chuckles softly as he pops a chocolate into his mouth. "Well, Sirius and James share one singular brain, so it's not easy for them to think all the time," he says jokingly. After having swallowed the chocolate, she giggles, shaking her head. "Pretty easy to talk to, Ren. Shame we never hung out before." She hums, and he shrugs as he looks down. "Well, I'm a year below me, so you really have no reason to hang out with me," points out, and she shakes her head. "It really shouldn't matter. I think you're a kind person. That's a reason enough," she hums, making him look up at her. His heart flusters. "I still remember the first time I ever saw you. It was when you were being sorted. You're so tiny. And you make it sound like I'm 100 years younger than you," he says teasingly, and she giggles. He was both surprised and happy to know that she had noticed him already in his first year. "I'm quite the old soul, as you may see," she hums, and he snorts. Before he can say anything in response, another voice from behind him startles him. "And we here were worried you were feeling lonely." He turns and sees Emily and Leslie smirking as they stand in front of the bed. "Good to see you here, Lupin." "Hi." He smiles shyly, a blush rising to his cheeks. He turns to look back at L'Oreal and smiles softly. "I'll go then." "Okay, thank you for coming. I appreciate it. And once again, I'll hear you and your friends have to hang out with us," L'Oreal says pointedly, and he nods. "See you around." he hums before standing up and leaving. He can't help the wide grin. He can't help the wide grin to make its way onto his lips as he walks out of the hospital ring. Giddily, he makes his way back to the commons, where he finds his friends still seated. They notice him walk in with a wide grin, and they give each other knowing smiles. As he slumps into one of the couches and lets out a dreamy sigh. "Dear Mooney, do tell us, what's got you all giddy like that?" James asks with a smirk, and Remus' grin widens even more. "Consider step one of Sirius's plan done." Remus breathes out, and Sirius smirks, feeling proud of his best friends. "That's my boy. When I tell you that by the end of the school year, you and her end up together, I mean it," Sirius says excitedly, but Remus ignores him as he can't help but daydream about her smile and her laughter. The same smile he had fallen in love with years ago. Now he had been because of it. Part 4. September 13th, 1975. Great Hall. Remus rests his head against the table, not paying attention to his friends. Last night had been another short night, thanks to James and Sirius arguing all night about what Muggle song would be Dumbledore's favorite. It had gone to a point that Sirius had turned to his dog form and chased James around the room, getting dog fur everywhere. His sleeping schedule was already a mess itself. He didn't need his friends to add on to it. "Lupin, you look like you haven't slept in years." He looks up to mention his name. To see Emily walking past him, his friend's conversation had stopped as they noticed the three girls. "You okay, Rum?" L'Oreal asked as she moves from behind her friends to look up at him. He smiles softly, happy to see her helping about again. "You look just sleep deprived. You look great. I mean, you recovered well, quickly." He gets flustered, making her giggle and shake her head. "Nothing Madame Pomfrey can't do. After a good night's sleep, I was ready to go," she hums, taking a seat next to him. Emily sits down next to Sirius, and Leslie next to Peter. You should try getting some sleep too." "Try sleeping with these idiots in the same room," Remus grumbles, making both James and Sirius gasp. "I thought you left us, Mooney," James says dramatically, making L'Oreal look at them in amusement. "What could possibly be bad about sharing a room with them?" Leslie asked curiously, leaning forward to look at Remus. "Well, never-ending arguments about trivial things," Remus answers, glaring playfully at two boys across from him. "There's nothing more important than figuring out what Muggle song is Dumbledore's favorite," Sirius says firmly, and L'Oreal starts shaking her head. "We had a discussion in our 5th year. Laurie has no idea what Muggle music was, so we thought it was more funny to argue with her about it." Emily snickers, and Sirius' eyes spark in excitement at the thought. Emily was a Muggle-born, making her knowledge of Muggle music more superior to L'Oreal. "That's not fair. It was literal bullying," L'Oreal says dramatically, and Remus chuckles softly. She bursts into tears because she was so confused. It was so cute. Leslie giggles. She was a half-blood, so she knew quite a bit when it came to Muggle stuff. "Oh, if it makes you feel better, Remus taught us everything we know," James says as L'Oreal blushes in slight embarrassment. She looks up at Remus and smiles. "Where were you when they were traumatizing me?" L'Oreal asks teasingly, and he chuckles, shrugging innocently. Trying to find a way to live," he says nonchalantly, making L'Oreal gap at him before hitting him softly. "Remus Lupin, don't you dare say that," she scolds him, making him smile sheepishly. "Sorry." He looks down. "Careful, Lupin. She will mother you," Leslie says jokingly, making James gasp. "Don't take my job away," James explained, making Lorelei give him a look. "You're doing a terrible job, Potter. Look at this poor soul. The eye bags. Caused by you, no less." Lorelei hums disapprovingly as she softly takes Remus's jaw in her hands and make him look up at her. I get that you're older than me, but it's not a reason to baby me," Remus points out. His heart was beating extremely fast. He wouldn't be surprised if she could hear it. He couldn't believe that a week ago they never said a word to each other, and now she was worrying for herself. But you are, baby," she points out, and he chuckles softly. She lets go of him, which saddens him. He already misses her touch. "I can't believe you took my mom title away," James grumbles, making her turn and smile at him. Remus can keep his eyes off of her. His staring didn't go unnoticed by his or her friends. She seemed to be the only one oblivious to his admiring gaze. "You'll be the godmother," she hums, and James sighs, before nodding in agreement with a wide grin. "Or you can be the wife," and James stays mother, Sirius suggests, making both her and Remus blush. He glares at his best friend, who seemed extremely proud of his comment. "Shut it, Black," Lorelei says under her breath. But Sirius hears and hears her and snickers. "Lori, we gotta go. Potion starts soon," Leslie says, making the whole blonde groan. "Ugh. Fine, okay, I'll see you fools around." Lorelei stands, Emily doing the same. Remus looks up at her, wishing she could stay longer. "Get some rest, Rem, okay?" "Okay," he nods, making her smile and ruffle his hair before leaving. Remus watches longingly as the three girls leave, laughing among each other. "Hey, Rem, I forgive a little drool over there," Sirius says jokingly, making Remus snap his head towards him and glare. He shouldn't have expected anything less from Sirius. "Whatever," Remus huffs, making his friends laugh. Remus had woken up this morning in an incredibly Part 4. September 13th, 1975. Great Hall. Remus rests his head against a table, not paying attention to his friends. Last night had been another short night, thanks to James and Sirius arguing all night about what Muggle song would be Dumbledore's favorite. It had gotten to a point that Sirius had turned to his dog form and chased James around the room, getting dog fur everywhere. His sleeping schedule was already a mess itself. He didn't need his friends to add on to it. "Lupin, you look like you haven't slept in years." He looks up to mention his name. To see Emily walking past him, his friend's conversation had stopped as they noticed the three girls. "You okay, Rem?" Lorelei asked as she moves from behind her friends to look up at him. He smiles softly, happy to see her helping about again. "You look just sleep deprived. You look great. I mean, you recovered well and quickly." He gets flustered, making her giggle and shake her head. "Nothing Madame Pomfrey can't do. After a good night's sleep, I was ready to go," she hums, taking a seat next to him. Emily sits down next to Sirius and Leslie next to Peter. You should try getting some sleep too." "Try sleeping with these idiots in the same room," Remus grumbles, making both James and Sirius gasp. "I thought you left us, Mooney," James says dramatically, making Lorelei look at them in amusement. "What could possibly be bad about sharing a room with them?" Leslie asked curiously, leaning forward to look at Remus. "Well, never-ending arguments about trivial things," Remus answers, glaring playfully at the two boys across from him. "There's nothing more important than figuring out what Muggle song is Dumbledore's favorite," Sirius says firmly, and Lorelei starts shaking her head. We had a discussion in our 5th year. Laurie has no idea what Muggle music was, so we thought it was more funny to argue with her about it. Emily snickers, and Sirius' eyes spark in excitement at the thought. Emily was a Muggle-born, making her knowledge of Muggle music more superior to L'Oreal. That's not fair. It was literal bullying, L'Oreal says dramatically, and Remus chuckles softly. She bursts into tears because she was so confused. It was so cute. Leslie giggles. She was a half-blood, so she knew quite a bit when it came to Muggle stuff. Oh, if it makes you feel better, Remus taught us everything we know, James says as L'Oreal blushes in slight embarrassment. She looks up at Remus and smiles. Where were you when they were traumatizing me? Laurie asks teasingly, and he chuckles, shrugging innocently. Trying to find a way to live, he says nonchalantly, making L'Oreal gap at him before hitting him softly. Remus Lupin, don't you dare say that, she scolds him, making him smile sheepishly. Sorry, he looks down. Careful, Lupin, she will mother you, Leslie says jokingly, making James gasp. Don't take my job away, James explained, making L'Oreal give him a look. You're doing a terrible job, Potter. Look at this poor soul with eye bags. Caused by you, no less, L'Oreal hums disapprovingly as she softly takes Remus's jaw in her hands and make him look up at her. I get that you're older than me, but it's not a reason to baby me, Remus points out. His heart was beating extremely fast. He wouldn't be surprised if she could hear it. He couldn't believe that a week ago they never said a word to each other, and now she was worrying for herself. But you are, baby, she points out, and he chuckles softly. She lets go of him, which saddens him. He already misses her touch. I can't believe you took my mom title away, James grumbles, making her turn and smile at him. Remus can keep his eyes off of her. His staring didn't go unnoticed by his or her friends. She seemed to be the only one oblivious to his admiring gaze. You'll be the godmother, she hums, and James sighs, before nodding in agreement with a wide grin. Or you can be the wife, and James stays mother. Sirius suggests, making both her and Remus blush. He glares at his best friend, who seemed extremely proud of his comment. Shut it, Black, L'Oreal says under her breath. But Sirius hears and hears her and snickers. Laurie, we gotta go. Potion starts soon, Leslie says, making the blonde groan. Ugh. Fine, okay, I'll see you fools around. L'Oreal stands, Emily doing the same. Remus looks up at her, wishing she could stay longer. Get some rest, Rem, okay? Okay, he nods, making her smile and ruffle his hair before leaving. Remus watches longingly as the three girls leave, laughing among each other. Hey, Rem, I forgive a little drool over there, Sirius says jokingly, making Remus snap his head towards him and glare. He shouldn't have expected anything less from Sirius. Whatever, Remus huffs, making his friends laugh. Remus had woken up this morning in an incredibly foul. So sorry for that. Chapter 5, September 17th, 1975, Library. Remus had woken up this morning in an incredibly foul mood. He didn't get easily annoyed, but this was nothing unusual. It happened once a month with the approaching full moon, and his friends who helped him through these times noticed it immediately. He was trying to focus on his assignments, but his mind was kept wandering. He could already anticipate how rough the night would be. Fortunately, though, it was Friday, which left him a weekend to recover. He wouldn't have to miss many classes. Here you go. He looks up as Sirius puts a chocolate bar in front of him. As cute as it was to give you as it was to give chocolate to Royale, you emptied your stock for her. Not so empty if you found this, Remus huffs in annoyance, making Sirius give him a look. Don't give me that attitude, Mooney. This is the last one, Sirius says pointedly. Remus takes a deep breath, trying to calm down. He hated how easily he snapped during the full moon. He could easily hurt his friends this way. James is going to try to find some more. How exactly is planning on doing that? Remus asks with a raised eyebrow. Sirius shrugs, unsure of the answer. He failed. James pants as he joins him. Remus rolls his eyes, looking down at his work. Why does non-full moon you have to be so romantic? Can we just drop it? Remus snaps as he takes a chocolate, ripping the package open. Damn, Mooney, is this how you feel about her? Peter asks, making both James and Sirius glare at him. Remus stiffens and glares at Peter, who immediately realizes his mistake. Can you stop talking about her? My life doesn't revolve around her. He snaps, his nose flaring, and Peter winces. Eat your chocolate, James says calmly. Don't tell me what to do, Remus snarls before standing up and stomps his way out of the library. Peter, you absolute idiot. You know tonight's a full moon. Why would you say something to anger him even more? Sirius hisses, and Peter shrinks back. James doesn't bother waiting for them before he runs after Remus. As he searches for a boy, he crosses paths with the Evans and her friends. On any other day, he'd stop to attempt to get a date for the millionth time, but he had priorities. Not long after seeing her, he quickly finds the person he's looking for. Remus, Mooney, stop, wait. James calls after him, but he doesn't show any signs of acknowledgement. James huffs and catches up with him. Hey, come on, Moons. He was just teasing. You're not actually mad about that, are you? I don't know. It's just a full moon, you know. Remus sighs, making James nod and understandment. And do you want to come back? Do you want to come back to our rooms until it starts getting darker? James asks, and Remus lets out a sigh before nodding in acceptance. Sure, James smiles, and the two slowly make their way to their room. As they're making their way out, they spot L'Oreal sitting out on the edge of a window. She was laughing at something a fellow Ravenclaw student was saying to her. Not any Ravenclaw student, it was Martin Every. Remus's heart dropped as he watched Martin lean down and kiss her. He hopes she pushes him, but she doesn't. James tries to say something, but to him, worried he might lash out. Let's go. Remus sighs in defeat. He never really thought he had a chance with her, but it still broke her heart to see her happy with someone else. James decides not to say anything for the whole way to their room, not wanting to say the wrong thing. As they reach a room, Remus suddenly walks to his bed, closing the curtains as he crawls up under the blanket. Sirius, who had already gotten there, looks at James questioningly. What happened? Sirius asks him worried. We just saw L'Oreal kiss Martin Every. James exclaims, and Sirius doesn't need to know more to understand. He wants slightly feeling bad for his friend. Is he gonna be okay? Peter asks, making the two other boys look at him with uncertainty. Not tonight, James says honestly, making Sirius nod in agreement. Remus could hear them whisper among each other. He couldn't care enough to listen. He felt like he'd lost a part of himself, but he felt like he didn't even have a right to feel that way. She was her own person, made her own decisions. He didn't control her in what they were in a relationship. He wasn't even sure if they could count themselves as friends. Part 6. September 20th, 1975. library. Good evening, Remus. He smiled softly at his fellow prefect, Lily Evans. Since they'd been chosen as prefect, they'd taken time to get to know each other. Prior to that, Lily was simply the girl James was in love with to Remus. And he was simply just the best friend of a boy who thought was all to her. Only to find out that they had more in common than they had thought. You seem a little sulky, Lily hums as she takes a seat across from him. He lets out a deep breath, resting his chin on his hands. Resting his chin on his hands are flat on the table. He looks up at her with a sad smile. Do tell what's heavy on your heart this lovely evening. You'll think I'm weird, he says. She raises an eyebrow before his off smirk catches on her lips. You're friends with Potter. I think we're way past that stage, she says, and he chuckles softly. It hurt him to see her look down at James, as if he wasn't worth her time. But he knew he couldn't get her involved. Sure, James had begged him to do so, and he'd put in a good word once in a while, but other than that, he wouldn't push her. Give the poor boy a break. He's more than what you think he is, he says, making her look at him. She had seen right through his attempt of changing the subject. He lets out a huff. Fine, there is this girl. Oh, there is? Lily asked, a little disappointed at the thought. She was well aware that it was wrong of her to like him when his best friend was pinning on to her, but she couldn't help it. Who is it? Orielle Tucker, he answers softly, not daring to say her name louder in fear they would be heard. The half-Vila, she gasped out in shock, making him wince. Remus, you are aware of her ability to enchant men, right? She's not like that, he grumbles, slightly annoyed by her prejudice. He was well aware of her abilities. And how would you know? For all you know, you could be under her charm. She hisses. Her eyes widen. Her eyes widen and glares at her. And he glares at her angrily. He didn't appreciate the way she spoke of L'Oreal. Lily was being unfair. She notices his annoyance and backs back down. Sorry, that's unfair. There was more to her than just her beauty and her ability to enchant men, he points out, and she gives a questioning look. You don't know her. She reminds him in size and defeat. She wasn't wrong about that. I want to, he mumbles, making her smile sadly. You realize she is dating Martin, right? He is quite popular among her year. I'm not saying you don't have your own charm, but everyone knows that they've been together for 2 years now, she says, and he looks at her bewildered. 3 years. That was how long he'd been in love with her, and he'd never known that she was already in love. 2 years. I didn't know, he says weakly, making his heart drop. Her eyes widen. Did you even know they were together? She asked, and he shakes his head in denial. Oh, Remus, you really are clueless. You know, I don't have the same confidence as James does to confess my feelings. He chuckles softly, and she starts shaking her head. Nope. Word of advice, don't do what he does. It's a little too much. She chooses her words carefully, knowing full well he'd tell James what she said. Then what, Lily? You don't understand how her every being consumes me. She doesn't even know. I don't want to just stand on the sidelines, he says desperately, and she watches him. She can see how much he felt for her. In that moment, she was determined to help him. Very well, I can help you. He gasps at her words. He didn't expect that from her. Have you talked to her? Once or twice, she admits, his heart fluttering at the thought of the short time they had spent together. He hadn't expected to be so comfortable around her. He thought he would stumble over his words and get flustered, but she put him at ease. "That's a start. How much do you trust me?" she asked, and his eyes widened. "I'm not sure," he says wearily. She sounded extremely suspicious right now. "Okay, well, you're gonna have to trust me on this. I assure you, by the end of the year, she will be yours," Lily says confidently, and he chuckles. Sirius believes the same. He hums, and she shakes her head in amusement. Of course he does. Chapter 7. September 21st, 1975. Great Hall. "Don't look now, but Lily just arrived," Sirius whispers across the table to James. Of course, since he was missing a few brain cells, in Remus's opinion, the boy snapped his head around so fast it surprised him it hadn't fallen off. Sirius lets out a breath of annoyance. "What do you not understand from 'don't look now'?" "I don't think he knows basic English," Remus hums softly as he shakes his head at James. Peter frowns, confused by his words. "But how does he?" Remus quickly cuts him, realizing that the poor boy didn't realize it was sarcasm. "It's not. I'm not serious." And Peter assures, and Peter nods in understanding. No, I'm serious. Remus groaned. Remus groans at the joke that he'd heard a million times since he'd known Sirius. "She's beautiful," James sighs dreamily, still staring at Lily openly. Remus grabs his head and turns to face it forward again. "Hey, what's that for?" "So that you stop being a creep and scare her away even more," Remus points out, and James huffs, knowing that he had a point. Sirius notices something from behind the two and raises an eyebrow. "Why is Marlene and Lily walking to Lorelei, Leslie, and Emily?" Sirius asks in confusion, but this time Remus doesn't want to snap his head around. His eyes widen as he watched Lily sit down with them. He knew she had said that she would help, but he wasn't expecting that. "I have a slight inkling," Remus says honestly, all four of them staring at the girls. "And what may that be?" James asked quickly, glancing at the werewolf before looking back at the girl. "I might have told Lily about my crush, and now she's determined in helping me get Lorelei," Remus explains, and Sirius smirks approvingly. "Perfect. Another player on my team. I assure you, Remus, Martin doesn't stand a chance," Sirius says excitedly, and Remus frowns slightly. "Well, shouldn't we not interfere with their relationship?" Remus wonders, and James shakes his head. "We won't interfere. We'll just make her realize you're a better option." James shrugs, trying not to get too distracted by Lily. It doesn't take long before they're caught staring. Lorelei smiles at the sight of Remus and waves happily at him, making him doing the same. Lily shakes his head as she notices that James was once again oogling her. Remus turns back around, not wanting to seem creepy either. He also has to shove James to turn around. Am I really a better option? Remus wonders, making his three friends glare at him. Don't make me throw this orange at you, Peter says pointedly, and Remus toughs. You don't get it. She's perfect. She's perfect in every possible way. And what am I? He points out, and Peter doesn't hesitate to throw the orange at him. Remus is able to dodge it, making it fall on the floor and roll across the room. Really? I warned you, Peter says honestly with a shrug. Throwing full round. How mature of you, Remus says as he throws a grate back at the boy who was hit right in the face. James snorts, putting a hand over his mouth to stop him from bursting into fits of laughter. Peter picks up an apple and throws it at Remus, who once again dodges it. But instead of falling and rolling away, it hits one of the Slytherin students. Peter and Sirius's eyes widen as James and Remus slowly turn around to see a glaring Severus Snape. Sirius Black looks up, having noticed the comment commotion, and one look at his brother, he already knew they were up to no good. Sniffles, sorry about that apple. Apples must have a certain attraction to you. But look at the bright side. At least something does, James says with a mocking smirk, and Regulus snorts. While Severus's glare intensifies. At least I'm not desperately trying to get the attention of a girl I'll never have. Oh wait, at least she doesn't hate me. Sirius snaps, making James angry. The boy jumps to his feet, ready to fight the boy. Remus grabs his robe, holding him back. James' sudden movement doesn't get unnoticed. The 5 girls across the room look up. Remus waves at them again as he stands up and pushes James away from Severus. His other friends are behind. You'll never get the girl, Potter, Severus calls after them, and James tries to run at him, but Remus holds him back. Lily is watching. Are you really gonna go after her friend? When you've already done lots of damage when it comes to that, Remus asks, making James huff and straighten up. James readjusts his glasses before all 4 leave the Great Hall. Chapter 8. September 24th, 1975. Courtyard. Remus is walking down the path that cuts through the courtyard, on his way back to the dorms from his last classes of the day. James had left the moment he saw Lily, then Sirius saw Severus, hoping to distract him while their friend attempted to charm the girl for the 100th time today. Peter had quickly followed Severus, leaving Remus on his own, as he didn't feel up to keeping up with their mischief on this particular day. Remus, hey! He turns around, a warm smile forming on his lips. His heart skips a beat at the sight of Lorelei walking up to him, dressed in her Quidditch uniform. Long time no see, Lupin. How are you? You've been getting some sleep? I'm doing well, and yes, I've been getting a little bit more sleep, he chuckles, softly making her smile happily. She didn't have to know that it was through naps. She didn't have to know that it was through naps in some classes that he got more sleep than he thought. How are you? Did you finish practice? I'm great. I'm actually on my way to practice. I saw you from across, and I thought I'd take a moment to come see you, she beams. His heart flutters happily. I'm honored. Shall I walk with you to the field then? He asks, making her blush a little. You don't have to. I don't want to be a bother. You probably have better things to do, she hums, and he shakes his head. Absolutely not, he assures her, causing her to smile happily as they walk side by side towards the field. Where are the other 3? She asks, glancing up at him. James is talking to Lily, Sirius, and Peter are probably annoying the hell out of Severus, he replies, and she snickers. Poor James, so obviously in love with her, and she can barely tolerate her, she hums, looking ahead at the Quidditch field. Well, at least he can talk to his crush, he blurts out, him widening as he realizes what he just said. She stops on her steps, making him turn around to look at her as she grins up. Remus Lupin, who is the special lady, sir? She asks excitedly, and he looks down nervously. You wouldn't know her, he says, knowing well enough that was far from the truth. Okay, I won't push you. Tell me who it is. Tell me who she is, but everything else is a must. What house is she in? Where is she from? Is she pretty? She must be. Oh, I'm so excited, she grins happily, and he chuckles softly, shaking his head. He turns back around and continues walking. She huffs, realizing he wasn't about to answer questions. Won't you at least answer one? How about we make this a little game, he asked, an idea coming to his mind. I'll answer any question other than who she is, when I think you deserve one. What exactly do I have to do to deserve one? She asked, and she catches up with him, and he smirks. That's for you to figure out, he shrugs, making her gape at him. Merlin's beard. You don't do things the easy way, do you, Rem? she whines, making him chuckle just as they reach the field. From where they were standing, he notices Martin glancing in their direction and lets out a breath. He realized maybe this little game wasn't a good idea. If she figured out it was her, she might be weirded out, or maybe he'd get in between of her happiness with Martin. He had to make sure that she never figured it out. If it were easy, it'd be boring, he points out, and she rolls her eyes, smiling, a smile stretching on her lips. Fine, when do I get my answer? Aurelie asks, and he glances down at her feet. He smiles softly, taking a moment to admire her. Her hair is flowing with the wind, her eyes sparkle with amusement and curiosity. Since this is the beginning, I'll grant you one now, he says, and she grins happily. What house is she in? She asks excitedly. Now that's just making it too easy, he says, and she huffs. Okay. What color are her eyes? She asks another question. Brown. The most common color eye? Really? There is between 55 and 75 of the world's population with brown eyes. She groans, making him chuckle and shrug. Good thing for you, you only have to focus on Hogwarts, he assures her, and she huffs before glancing toward her team. He looks in that direction as well as see Martin glaring at them. Why should go? I have kept the team captain away for long enough. Will you come to the game tomorrow? We're playing Hufflepuff. She looks at him hopefully. Sure, I'll be cheering you on. He smiles, making her grin. Great, she exclaims, before making her way towards the team. She stops again and turns around with a soft smile. Oh, and whoever the girl is, she's the luckiest girl in the world. He beams at her, feeling his heart flutter as he watches her run towards her team. The smile drops as she wraps her arm around Martin, and he sighs, before making his way back to the castle. Part 9. September 25th, 1975. Quidditch field. Remus leans forward, looking down at the field from stands that are elevated to make it easier for the watchers to watch the players. His heartbeat was increasingly fast. The last time he'd been here, he watched Aurelie fall to a near death. He could only hope that history would not repeat itself. If you lean a little bit more forward, you'd fall. James pulls him back, easing the collar of his sweater. You really don't need that. Sorry, I'm just a little bit worried, Remus admits, rubbing his neck to soothe the slight pain that was caused by his collar digging in the skin. She's by far one of the best players, and she's been playing for 4 years now. You've nothing to worry about, Sirius tries to assure him, and Remus sighs, running a hand through his already messy hair. And that doesn't stop the fact that she fell, Remus points out, making James and Sirius look at each other, giving each other knowing looks. Just relax and let's enjoy the game. She won't want you to worry, James says, and Remus huffs, knowing that James had made a fellow point. Anyway, look, it's starting. Remus perks up, watching carefully, waiting for her to come out. Sirius chuckles, shaking his head at his friend, finding it so amusing how easily his mood could change due to the girl. He really found it amusing to watch his two friends pinning for girls, who didn't give them the attention they deserved. Sure, Aurelie seemed to enjoy Remus's company, unlike Lily with James. Sirius strongly believes that Remus deserves more than just that. Remus smiles happily as he finds the familiar blonde messily tied up. Remus smiles happily as he finds the familiar blonde-haired, messily tied up flying. Doesn't take her long for her to notice him too, and a wide smile forms on her face, making his heart flutter. She happily waves at him with just as much enthusiasm. He waves back. Both are so immersed in their little bubble they don't even notice the glaring on them, with glaring eyes on them from a specific boy. Soon, the Hufflepuff team joins, and each player gets in position. And before he knows it, he watches as her and the Hufflepuff seek are chasing after the snitch. Everyone is cheering, hoping for their chosen team to win. Of course, him and his friends were hoping for Ravenclaw to win, and it seemed like they were. I never realized how good of a keeper Martin was, James admits, drawing Remus's attention to the mentioned boy. James wasn't wrong. Remus was amazed by how well Martin was able to stop every quaffle from going through goalposts. Remus couldn't help but feel intimidated by that. No wonder Lorelai and Martin were together. She was a star seeker, easily one of the best after James, and he was after James, and Martin was an extremely good keeper. It was like they were meant to be. It broke his heart and reduced his hopes even more of ever having a chance with Lorelai. She'd never been interested in him when he couldn't begin to understand how to play Quidditch. Where was he at the last game? I didn't see him, Peter wonders, catching the attention of three boys. Remus's eyes widened in realization. Peter was right. Remus had not seen Martin, and if his focus was on Lorelai, even after she had fallen, he had not seen the keeper. That's strange. Why would the keeper not be there? And most importantly, why didn't we see him when Lorelai fell? As her boyfriend, he should have been there. Sirius's voice says out, getting Remus out of his thoughts. I can easily look into it, James says, glaring at Remus, silently asking permission to do so. Yeah, could you? Remus asks, and James nods. He didn't necessarily want to pry into their lives, but Remus had found it too strange that Martin had not been there when she needed him most. He shakes his head and takes a deep breath before glancing back at the game. He looked back and just in time to see Lorelai get closer to the snitch. He watches in anticipation, her hand reaching out and leaning forward to get closer. In a blink of an eye, she catches it, making him let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Everyone's supporting Ravenclaw team jumps to their feet, cheering happily as Lorelai holds the snitch up with a proud smile. Remus cheers happily, clapping excitedly for her. Come on, let's go join her, James says, pulling Remus towards the stairs. Before boys run down the stairs, even missing a few steps sometimes. It doesn't take them long enough to reach the ground floor and rush towards the tent where Ravenclaw prepared for the games. They know some of the players are standing outside, holding their brooms as they congratulate each other. They also notice that Emily and Leslie had already arrived. They stop at a fair distance, waiting for Lorelai to finish before going to congratulate her. Remus notices Martin making his way to her, and she looks up at her boyfriend smiling at him. But before they can reach her, Emily whispers something to her, and she turns to look at Remus. Her smile widening even more. Martin stops in his steps, watching in shock as she completely forgets about him and rushes for a Gryffindor. Rem, you came! Lorelai says excitedly, not hesitant to wrap her arms around him, making his eyes widen. Of course, I wouldn't miss it for the world, Remus says softly, in turn wrapping his arms around her. His heart felt like it was about to explode. He wondered if she could hear it. I'm so glad you did, she beams happily. As she pulls away and looks up at him, she couldn't help but smile, overwhelmed with joy seeing her. He couldn't help but smile, overwhelmed with joy seeing her so happy. Do we not exist to you anymore? Remus asked teasingly, bursting their little bubble. Sirius hits him, and Lorelai chuckles as she lets go of Remus, smiling at the three boys. Remus is slightly annoyed at Peter for ruining the moment, but decides to let it go. Emily and Leslie joined them, with 7 of them happily conversing and congratulate the speaker on her win. Remus sensed his eyes on him as he looks to see Martin glaring at him. He feels uncomfortable under his glare and turns back to his friends, trying to ignore Martin. Part 10. September 30th, 1975. Gryffindor Commons. Since the Quidditch match, Lorelei, Emily, and Leslie had gotten closer to the boys, having spent every meal with them in the Great Hall. Sometimes even Remus and Lorelei would cross paths in the hall walking together until they had to go separate ways. He had gotten to know Lorelei better in that time, from her favorite color to her favorite childhood memory. He'd never been more happy than he was right now, being able to spend so much time with her. But it came with a small downfall, that being the hatred for Martin, who'd always glare at him. Sirius had told him not to mind it, but he felt a little uncomfortable under the hateful gaze. Okay, hello, I have some news to share, James announced as he throws himself on the couch. Sirius groans in annoyance and pushes him off. James huffs as he falls to the ground. Does it require you to annoy us? Sirius asks with a teasing smirk. James rolls his eyes, choosing to ignore him. It's concerning Martin, James says, making Remus glare at him in curiosity. I asked about at practice today, and unfortunately enough, I fell upon a nice lad who is friends with Martin's cousin. Okay, and what did this lad have to say? Peter asked, propping himself up on his elbow from a couch across from where James is sitting on the floor, while Sirius just takes up the whole couch. Apparently, Martin had to meet up with Slytherin about something and therefore couldn't attend. He even asked Lorelei if he could miss a game. James explained, making Remus bite his lips in the frown as he frowns on thought. Why would he want to meet up with a Slytherin? Remus wonders aloud, and James snaps his finger. That's exactly what I thought, so I asked around even more. No one had any idea, and I didn't want to dig in too much to avoid raising suspicion. But unfortunately, I heard this first-year student talking about a rogue bludger. Apparently, it was a Slytherin student who hexed it, James says, and the other boys were in shock. There's no way that's a coincidence. But at the same time, it makes no sense. Why would Martin want to set a rogue bludger free when his 2-year-long girlfriend is on the field? Sirius asks, and James shrugs. We could definitely look more into it, Remus says, making his friends nod in agreement. None of this made any sense to him. Sirius was right. Why would Martin want to harm Lorelei? Most importantly, why would he be doing this now when he could have done it before? He was lost, and so many questions flooded his mind. Should we tell Lorelei about this? Peter asked, making Remus snap his head and look at him. Absolutely not. We don't have enough proof to just go randomly accuse the person she loves. It pained him to say the last part. No matter how envious he was of Martin, he would never willingly do or say anything to ruin their relationship. We definitely need more proof, but where do we even start? Sirius asked, making Remus lean back, showing his head back to look at the ceiling in thought. They couldn't just venture around randomly asking questions about Martin. That would raise too many suspicions. They couldn't exactly follow him around either, and that would be creepy, and since they're all in the same building, he'd immediately notice. There wasn't many solutions in all honesty. I'm not sure. I think for now we can't do much. And as soon as he does something suspicious, we try to get as much information as possible. Remus answers his question. Mooney, are you okay with all this? I mean, we're talking about the boyfriend of your crush. James expresses his worry, and Remus lets out a sigh. I want her to be happy, even if she's not by my side, or if she never talks to me again. But I also don't want her to be in harm's way, Remus says honestly before looking down at James. If she hates me for what we're going to do, but we somehow save her being hurt, then I'll live with it. We'll make sure that never happens, Sirius says firmly. After all, she's supposed to be in love with you by the end of the year. Do you really believe that's gonna happen? Remus asks, and Sirius nods, clearly determined to make it happen. I can only dream of it happening. Don't worry. Soon it won't be a dream anymore. Chapter 11. October 1st, 1975. Great Hall. Sirius, Orion, Black, I will slap you right into the next century. Emily huffs as Sirius snickers at the pudding girl. L'Oreal and Remus, who were in a conversation, turned to look at the two in confusion. It was only them four. James had practice while Peter and Leslie had run off together somewhere. Sirius and Emily had chosen to play a game of chess. Sirius had been trying to distract the poor girl into losing by making random comments that are absolutely absurd. He had succeeded into annoying Emily so much that she had gotten distracted and lost. You okay, Em? L'Oreal asks her friend in amusement, and Emily. In her state of annoyance, looks up with a glare. L'Oreal doesn't need her to say anything to know the answer. She turns to look at Remus, who seems both amused and worried. This boy annoys me. Can we throw him into the lake? Well, Emily asks, making Sirius gape at her in disbelief. I'll help you, Remus chimes in, making Sirius gasp and L'Oreal snickers, shaking her head. Let's not throw him into the lake, L'Oreal giggles, making Sirius huff and cross his arms with a pout. Thanks, Laurie. At least someone is on my side. I can't believe you betrayed me like that, Mooney. Sirius grumbles, and Remus shakes his head at his friend. Whatever, Prongs. Don't be so whiny. Remus teases, making Sirius glare at him. His eyes told a different story as they glistened in amusement. What would your crush think if she saw you act like this? Sirius asked with a smirk playing on his lips. Remus's eyes widen as he gets all flustered. Sirius is well aware of a little game between L'Oreal and Remus, so are James and Peter. L'Oreal perks up at the mention of mysterious crush. When do I get my next clue? Laurie asks with excitement. You know the rules, Laurie. Remus clears his throat, trying to regain his composure. L'Oreal pouts as her shoulders drop. Fine, but I don't even know what to do. L'Oreal whines, and Remus chuckles, shrugging innocently. Seduce him till you get all the answers, Emily suggests with a proud grin, making Sirius snicker as L'Oreal and Remus look at her with wide eyes. I would pay to see that. Sirius hums, and Remus glares at him. Yeah, of her options. What is it about Remus Lupin that will make him think I'm worthy? That I'm worthy. L'Oreal wonders out loud, not intending to her question to be answered by anyone in particular. Remus is a simple guy, but he's also very complex. Sirius chimes in, making L'Oreal turn to look at him. He is very studious, calm, shy, caring, and trustworthy. I think to get your answers, you have to prove to yourself worthy. Be a person you think is worth the time of Remus John Lupin. Was the middle name necessary? Remus grumbles, causing Sirius to wink at him with a smirk. Someone worth his time. Okay, so be the best person I could ever be, L'Oreal exclaims, clearly determined. Remus glances at her and smiles softly. What she didn't know was that she was already worth his time and more. He'd give her the world if he could. She was by far one of the most amazing people he had ever met. The way she didn't let others bring her down, her curiosity, her desire to achieve as much as she could, all of that already made her the best person ever. Ask a question. Ask at him. She looks at him with wide eyes. What is she like? He hadn't expected that question, but he smiled softly. She's a very curious person, Remus hums, making Lorelei grin. A clue. Brown eyes and curious. That's a Ravenclaw characteristic. Does that mean she's a Ravenclaw? Lorelei asks Remus and gives her a look. One answer only. Remus reminds her, and she huffs, but her smile doesn't shift. Okay, I'm glad you got to answer a question today. Lorelei beams as he smiles warmly. At this rate, you'll know too soon. He muses as she giggles, shaking her head at him. Are you saying I'm a person worth your time? She asks, tilting her head a little slightly, and he chuckles. You're certainly worth it more. Remus says, leaning on his elbows. A slight touch tints her, and he feels his heartbeat skip. He felt himself fill with pride, knowing that he's the reason behind her brush. Smooth, Remus. Really smooth. Only smirks, making Remus blush slightly and look down. Chapter 12. October 6, 1975. Hogwarts Halls. We're doing human transfiguration. It's genuinely terrifying. Lorelei hums as she walks side by side with Remus. He looks down at her, curious of her words. Is it similar to an Amadeus form? I'm so sorry if I said that wrong. Except instead of being an animal, it's an object? Remus asks, and she chuckles softly. Yeah, but if you do it wrong, you can be stuck in that form forever. Imagine being stuck as a chair or a cup. Lorelei points out, making him once have a thought. It certainly was not a pleasing idea. Remember in second year we had to learn Vero? A student couldn't figure out how to undo it, and Professor McGonagall had not interfered. Imagine. Poor animal. Unless you're planning on transferring it into a chair or cup, I'm sure you'll be fine. Remus hums, trying to reassure her. She smiles, clearly feeling less worried. And are you not top of the class? You probably won't struggle. Actually, Martin is. He's really good. He makes me feel so dumb. She huffs, as a slight pout on her lips as he shoves her lightly. Don't say that. You're smart, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Not even yourself. He says pointedly, and she smiles softly, a blush adoring her cheeks. But before Ivor can say anything else, someone calls for Remus. He turns around in confusion, settles on his features, and as he sees Martin walking towards them. Lupin, I think we should talk, Martin says firmly, making Lorelei look at him in confusion. An unsettling feeling rises up in Remus as he feels himself get nervous. Sure, what's up? He asks, trying not to show his nervousness. Martin takes a quick glance at Lorelei, but doesn't even greet her. What do you think you're doing? Martin asks, and Remus looks at him in bewilderment. I'm making my way to the Gryffindor Tower, Remus says. Of course he knew that wasn't what Martin meant but when asking that question, but he was not about to fall into his game. You know exactly what I meant. Don't act dumb, Lupin. Martin snaps, having seen Ryford react. Lorelai's eyes widen in shock, not having expected Martin to act this way. She takes a quick look at Remus, wondering why he was acting so calm. That's when she noticed the little tick in his jaw, as if he was holding back his anger. She wondered if he was trying to stay calm for her sake. Martin, what the bloody hell? Lorelei snaps right back, surprising the two boys. It was known that Lorelei usually kept a calm demeanor no matter what. Why are you acting this way? Unless you're going to apologize to him, I don't want to hear it. He's my friend, and you can't talk to the people I care about like that. What's gotten into you? L'Oreal asks in annoyance. Remus's eyes widen. He felt his heart flutter. Seeing L'Oreal defend him made him feel like like nothing else in this world mattered because L'Oreal cared for him. Are you really taking the side of that monster? Martin snaps, snapping Remus out of his daze. He felt his heartbeat increase and a panic settle in him. He had heard worse, with a thought that L'Oreal might start to think the same thing. Repeat that? You called him a what now? L'Oreal asked, moving to stand in between Remus and Martin. She glared up at her boyfriend, making him take a step back. I think you must have hit your head during practice. Remus, come on, we have better things to do. Before anyone else could say anything, L'Oreal turns around and takes Remus's hand before dragging him away. Even though they were getting further away from Martin, the panic didn't subside. He was still worried that she'd think he was a monster if she was ever to find out what he truly was. I'm sorry, I don't know why he acted like that. He's usually more caring. L'Oreal sighs, not daring to look up at him, as if ashamed. Don't apologize, it's not your fault. Remus stops, tugging her softly to turn around and look up at him. She looks at him, and his heart skips a beat. But you didn't have to take my defense like that. You've known him longer than me. Not an excuse, Remus. You're important to me, she says, taking a step closer, and his breath gets caught at the back of his throat. He's just as important to me. His shoulders drop. He wasn't sure what he expected, but he shouldn't have expected it. He was just one of her friends, that's it. And I won't stand casually as he acts that way, no matter what. Remus, you are my friend, and nothing can change that, she says in determination, and without hesitation, she wraps her arms around his neck and pulls him close. Once again, he is shocked by her sudden action. Soon he melts into her arms, slowly wrapping his arms around her waist and pulling her even closer. Being in her arms this time felt different from the first time. Felt like he was holding her on as if afraid he'd leave her. He buries his face on her shoulder, closing his eyes as she takes her sin in. She smelled like freshly cut grass, the fresh air of the mountains, and something sweet. He smiles softly, feeling overwhelmed to be able to hold her so tightly. And if he had it this way, he'd stay like this forever. Chapter 13, October 9th, 1975. Great Hall. Remus sighs as he takes a seat next to James at the table for dinner. He looks around trying to find L'Oreal since she usually sat with them nowadays, so he hoped that today was no exception. Hello, boys. Feels like forever since we've seen you. Dorcas Meadows sits down next to Remus, Marlene across from her. He smiles at the two girls, happy to see his other friends after a while. Yeah, well, Remus has it. He's been too busy being L'Oreal's new boyfriend to have time for us, Marlene says teasingly as she leans closer, making Remus gape at her as he gets flustered. Is that true? Did you finally get together? Dorcas asks, her eyes widening with excitement. Remus gapes at her question, unsure how to answer that question. From a corner of eyes, he notices a familiar blonde hair as he turns to see L'Oreal. They're met, and his heart drops as he notices how her eyes didn't have her usual spark of happiness. A frown settled on her face as she looks at him, before turning away and walking towards where Marion was waiting for her. Remus lets out a sigh and turns back to look at Dorcas. No, I didn't, Remus says with disappointment, looking down his plate, with three boys, having noticed what happened, give each other looks of worry before glancing at their friend. I'm sorry, Remus. You know what? She doesn't deserve you. She can't realize what an amazing person you are, Dorcas says, softly, having noticed how sad he had become after mentioning her. I know you probably don't want to hear this, but maybe it's time to let her go, Marlene says, making Sirius's eyes widen as he shakes her head. Sirius, you can't possibly think it's okay for him to pin over for life. Remus stops paying attention to what they're saying as he gets lost in his thoughts. Maybe Marlene was right. Perhaps it was time to let her go. It would be hard, but it would be for the best. She was clearly happy with Martin, and he couldn't keep living in hope that one day she'd come to him. He takes a deep breath, glancing over his shoulder and searches for her presence. He finds her sitting at the Ravenclaw table with Emily and Leslie. Martin was engaged in conversation with other Ravenclaw students, but he noticed that Lorelei wasn't paying attention to any of that. She played around for fork mindlessly. He wondered what had made her so sad. He wished he could comfort her. No, he was barely her friend. She'd find comfort in Martin. Shaking his head, he turns back to look at his friends, seeing Sirius and Marlene still in a heated debate on the matter. Marlene is right, Remus says firmly, making the two stop arguing. They all look at him in shock. I think it's better if I just let her go. She'd never want me anyway, not if she knew the truth. Don't go there, Moody. You know that she would never judge based on that. Have you forgotten that she was one of the rare people in the school that nobody's like to not feel fully accepted because of a difference? James says, reminded reason of many rumors and the hate that she would receive for being half Vila. Still, there is no point in hoping that there would ever be something between her and I. Remus sighs, making Sirius shake his head. Before he can say anything, Marlene cuts through. Remus, we just want you to be happy. You don't have to do what we say. If you love her and don't want to let it go, we will support you. If you do let her go, we will also support you. So just follow your heart, Marlene says softly, making him sigh. I don't know what my heart wants, Remus admits, and Dorcas smiles softly. Then don't let go yet. Wait until you know what your heart wants. And Dorcas muses, before nodding in the direction where Lorelei is sitting. He glanced there once again, just in time to see Lorelei look at him. He smiles softly, and she mirrors his smile, waving at him. Her eyes seem to lighten a bit. I think she just needs time to realize what she feels for you. I agree. Lorelei probably likes you more than you think she does, but she's probably blinded by Martin, Sirius says determinedly, making Remus turn back to look at them. I don't know. Maybe I should just take my distance for a bit, nonetheless. Just to think this through. Remus sighs, and Sirius's shoulders drop. If that's what you want, Sirius says in defeat. After all, Sirius was the first one that had encouraged Remus to make a move. The first one to believe Lorelei could possibly reciprocate feelings from beginning. Remus still remembers how vividly Sirius had nearly rushed him out to follow Lorelei the day Remus had first seen her. Sirius had been determined to make her know Remus's existence and have them fall in love. But Remus had been against it. Now Sirius was once again certain that she'd fall in love with Remus. But he once again gone against the idea. It felt like history was repeating itself. Chapter 14. October 12th, 1975. Gryffindor dorms. Remus is staring at the ceiling, lost in thought. James had once again disappeared. Sirius was sitting on the windowsill, staring outside mindlessly as he smoked, and Peter was attempting to get his assignments done. His mood had been a lot more gloomy since that day in the Great Hall with Marlene and Dorcas. Of course, it hadn't gone unnoticed by his friends, but they didn't dare mention it, and the full moon was coming soon. More reasons to not to try and annoy him. You'll never guess what I found out, James exclaims as he slams the door open. Remus sits up to look at him in confusion. James shuts the door as he rushes to the center of the room, all attention on him. Apparently, Martin and a few Slytherins want to get Lorelei to leave the school. What? Remus asks in disbelief, noticing Sirius stub out his cigarette as he pulls all his attention on James's words. Something about her not being fully human. They've been planning this for 2 years. They're the ones who always start the rumors about her. James explains, and Remus falls against his bed's headboard. This whole time, Martin had been manipulating her. Had been manipulating Lorelei and making her seem like a monster to the school behind her back. While she thought she was happily in love with a great person, the truth was that she was in love with the most vile person. He'd rather have her date Severus Snape compared to Martin. Worst part wasn't that the rumors were against her being half Vila, but that the only reason she was able to attend Hogwarts was because she seduced her way in. He'd been so horrified at the rumors, and he couldn't even imagine what she had felt in those moments. He would have never imagined that the source of those rumors had been next to her this whole time. We can't let him continue this. We have to tell her, Remus says in panic, but Sirius jumps to his feet. Remus, stop what we said last time. Can't tell her anything without proof. Sirius reminds him, but he simply shakes his head. To hell with that. I can't let her stay with him. Remus snaps, making Sirius glance at James for help on the matter. When was the last time you talked to her? James asks Remus, who frowns. A week ago? Why? Remus asks in confusion. James gives him a look. So you don't talk to her for a week, and suddenly you want to accuse her boyfriend. No matter how right we are, we're not close enough to her, so that she'd believe us over her 2-year boyfriend. James points out, and Remus's shoulders drop immediately in defeat. And James was right. He'd been avoiding her this whole week, trying to figure out his feelings. Now he couldn't just show up and say such things against Martin, not without proof. With a sigh, he lets his head fall back as he closes his eyes and thought. We need to find a way to get the Slytherins, James groans in annoyance, and Sirius smirks as an idea comes to mind. I'm sure my dearest brother would not mind, Sirius says as his eyes glint with mischief. But we can't stand and not do something. What about Lorelei? Peter asks, making Remus look back at his friends with a frown. Remus, are you still down for Operation Seduce Lorelei? Sirius asks with a wide grin, and Remus gives him a look of annoyance. Oh, come on. I know you're trying to figure out your emotions. It's Lorelei. If you wanted to let her go, you'd have done so long ago. I hate that you're right. Remus grumbles, and Sirius snickers. Okay, so while Remus gets closer to Lorelei, we recruit Regulus and get as much evidence to go against Martin, James says, summarizing their plan. This is getting messy. What if we mess up? Peter asks in worry, making Remus clench his jaw. That's why we can't mess up, Remus says with determination as he gets out of bed, walking to his closet and taking a chocolate out from where he stashed it. He needed something to distress. You're right, Wormtail. This is getting messy. Once we start this, we can't back out, James points out, making them all look at each other. I'm in, Sirius says, crossing his arms over his chest. Absolutely, Peter says before they all turn to look at Remus. He bites off a piece of chocolate. As he swallows it, he glances up at his friends. Without a question, Remus says, making them smirk. This is a job for marauders, and we will solve it, James says excitedly, making Remus shake his head in slight amusement. Chapter 15. October 16th, 1975, Courtyard. A full moon was tomorrow, and he had barely any sleep in him, so he felt in a particularly foul mood. He runs his fingers through his hair, trying to calm himself down before he did anything he regretted. This morning, he nearly punched Sirius for breathing too loud. His heart was beating fast, and his senses were overly sensitive, driving him insane. He was so lost in his own world that he hadn't realized someone was in his way as he bumped into them. His anger skyrocketed, and he turns around with a glare when he snapped in person, but someone grabbed his forearm, making him turn around to see the small figure of Lorelei standing there with worried eyes. Ram, are you okay? I could sense your anger all the way across the courtyard, she says softly, and surprisingly, he felt all of his anger vanish as he takes a deep breath. Her calming presence seemed to have an effect on him. Bad day. It wasn't a complete lie, but he wasn't bad to tell her the truth. Do you want to talk about it? A cup of tea? I still have some of the chocolates you gave me stashed somewhere. She suggests. He simply shakes his hand in denial. Even though he was calmer now, he didn't know when he'd snap again, and he certainly didn't want to hurt her in any way. I should probably go back to my room, he says, but her stubbornness won't allow it. I feel like you should vent first. I use practice as a method of venting. She muses, and he frowns, feeling his anger rising again. He just wanted to go back to his room, but she was still insisting. No, it's better I go back, he says, clenching his jaw and keep his anger down. She gives him a look of disbelief. I don't think so. Come on, let's go for a walk. She reaches forward to take his hand, but he takes a step back. Stop it, I don't want to take a walk, vent, or even talk to you. Why won't you just leave me alone? He snaps angrily, not being able to hold it anymore. Even though his words had been harsh, she seemed unfazed. I'm worried, Remus. You're usually a lot calmer than this, Marielle says, making him scoff. What do you even know? You don't even know me. We're not even friends, he says. This time she flinched at his last words. Don't say that. Of course we're friends, she says softly, watching his eyes darken with anger. No, we're not. Your boyfriend doesn't want us to be friends, so why should we? He snarls, making her huff. He doesn't control me. If I want to be friends with you, I will. Martin will have to live with it, she says firmly, making him shake his head with a dry chuckle. Certainly. It's not like you'd bend backwards for him. You're so dependent of him. If you really didn't care what he thought, you wouldn't have avoided me this whole time, Remus says angrily, and she scoffs. Wow, Remus, really? That's how you're going to be. It's not like you haven't been avoiding me too. Seriously, what's gotten into you? You're not the Remus I know, Aurelie says, crossing her arms over her chest. You don't know me. Stop acting like you do. Marlene's beard, why are you so confident in yourself to think that everything is the way you want it to be? You're nothing but another girl who doesn't even realize what's truly going on around you. Hell, even Martin's using you, Remus blurts out, immediately regretting his words as she flinches. You'd be surprised about how much I really know. But like you said, we're not friends, and we certainly don't know each other. Enjoy the rest of your life, Lupin, she says weakly before shoving past him. He turns out, reaching out for her and hopes to stop her and apologize. Instead, he droops his hand to his side and sighs. He royally screwed up, and he feels absolutely defeated. He should run after her, be honest with her, but he knew he couldn't control his anger in times like this. So instead of making things worse, he was better off just going back to his room. He dropped his head, staring at the ground as he made his way back to a Gryffindor tower. He shoved past a few students, not even caring at this point. His mind was all over the place. He felt like he was fighting a losing war against his inner demons. His heart felt heavy that he can't give an image of her eyes full of heartbreak and disappointment. He didn't know how he'd fix it, or if he even could. Would she ever forgive him for harsh words? And if she knew the truth, would she have run away or understood? Uncertainty filled him as he walked into the common room. It was buzzing with Gryffindor students who were discussing classes, laughing at jokes, and simply enjoying some free time. He even noticed his friends at their usual spot. "Hey Remus, join us," Peter calls after him cheerfully, but Remus ignores him and makes his way up to their room. The three boys give each other looks of worry. They'd expect him to snap at them or scoff in annoyance at least, but his silence had been more frightening than his anger. Worry and panic settled in them. Chapter 16. October 19th, 1975. Hospital ring. He groans, dropping his head back against the pillow of the bed. He'd just woken up. He felt like he'd been run over multiple times, lacking any form of strength. It had been a rough night, and he was glad that his friends had been there to help him. Otherwise, it would have been worse. He glances around and sighs. As much as he appreciated their support and help, he saw them sleeping around his bed. He couldn't help but feel bad. Of course, knowing them, they'd never accept to let him go through a full moon all alone. Remus, there is someone who wants to see you. Madame Pomfrey smiles softly as she appears in front of him. He glances up in confusion and he senses James stir up, pushing himself to look up at the nurse. "Who?" Remus asks, not knowing who could possibly be here. He hadn't told Lily or any of the other girls about him being a werewolf, so he couldn't imagine them being here. "How about you see for yourself?" Madame Pomfrey smiles, nodding for the person to come closer. His eyes widen in shock as he sees who it is. James gasps in disbelief, nudging Sirius to wake up. "What?" Sirius grumbles as he glances around, but he notices the person who joined them. His eyes widen. "Could I talk to Remus alone?" she asks nervously, making James and Sirius clear their throat as they nod. Sirius stands up, shaking Peter awake. The boy grumbles in annoyance, but lets James and Sirius drag him away. Remus felt like he was dreaming, not understanding why she was here. After all, the last time they saw her, he'd been an absolute asshole to her. He even believed that she'd never forgive him for his harsh words. Yet, there she was. But he could see that his words had affected her. Her eyes were bloodshot and tear-stained now marked her pale skin. "I'm sorry. How did you know about Martin?" they both said at the same time. Remus's eyebrows shoot up in confusion. You can go first." Lorelei clears her throat, looking down at her feet. He lets out a sigh, feeling bad. "I'm sorry about the other day. I shouldn't have said what I said. Of course, you're my friend, and you're not what I said you are. There's no excuse for what I said," he says softly, making her look up, and she shakes her head with a soft smile. "It's okay, I know why you did it," Lorelei hums as she moves closer, sitting on the edge of the bed. He looks at her in disbelief, and she gives him a look. "What?" "Remus, I'm not stupid. You're not good at hiding it, don't get me wrong. But as someone who isn't fully human, I kind of guessed. Sudden anger outburst near the full moon, ending up in the hospital wing after the full moon. Why are you not running away?" he asked. It was a stupid question, but in some ways he couldn't help but feel anxious about it. She smiled softly, taking his hands with both of hers. "Because you didn't run away, even though I'm half Vila, and no one wants to be friends with me. Leslie and Emily were the real ones. Hell, even Martin doesn't want me." She hums, mindlessly flipping his hand around so that his palm faced up, and she traced the small patterns on it with her fingers. "You know about Martin?" he asked, making a scoff. "Of course. He only asks lovingly when he wants something," she muses, and he frowns a response. "Why do you stay with him then?" he wonders, and she looks up at him, a small spark playing on her lips. But what better way to get revenge for backstabbing? He thinks I'm fallen for his game, when in reality he fell for mine," she says, causing him to chuckle. "Smart. Boys and I wanted to find to prove what he did for showing you. We didn't want to hurt you. He hums and she smiles warmly. She raises a hand, putting it against his cheek and running her thumb over his scar on his jaw. He leans into her touch. Don't worry about me. I've got this, but I appreciate it. How did you even figure it out? She asked me, and he shrugs earnestly. It started with a rogue blusher. He answers softly, causing her to chuckle. Fair enough. She hums, dropping her hand back to his. He already misses the warmth of her touch. How much longer are you going to stay with him? He asks, and she takes a deep breath. Normally, I was going to wait until he finally reveals his motive. But things have changed. Not much longer. I'm just waiting for the right moment, she admits, and he raises an eyebrow. He doesn't even have to ask for her to know what he is wondering. What had changed? There is someone else that I like. Oh, he breathes out, his heart dropping. He clears his throat, looking down nervously. He's a lucky guy. I am the lucky one, she muses. Nothing else is said between them as she fiddles with his fingers, drawing patterns on his wrist. You can ask a question about my crush, he says, and she looks up with excitement. Is it Dorcas? She asks, making him snort and shake his head. No. She's like Marlene. Lorelai's lips form an O-shaped in realization. That's cute. Are they together already? They'd make a good couple, she hums, as she can already imagine it. Yeah, it has been for a few months, he hums, and she grins happily. Well, I'm happy for them, although I still don't know who the mystery girl is. She huffs, causing him to bite his lip to stop himself from grinning. He looks down at her with a loving look as she smiles softly. Can I know who your mystery boy is? He asks, making her eyes wide and look away with a soft blush. Well, I don't know. He likes someone else. She clears his throat. Oh, well, he's the one missing out, he says softly, and she shakes her head in smiling amusement. Funny you'd say that, she says under her breath, but he clearly heard her. He decides to ignore it. I'll say who it is if you tell me who she is. No way, you're supposed to figure it out, he points out, causing her to grumble. He smiles happily, glad that she didn't hate him after their argument. 13th. October 20th, 1975. Gryffindor Commons. So, wait, this whole time you've known about Martin? Peter asks, trying to understand what Lorelai and her friends just told them. Remus really hadn't been paying attention to what they were saying until now, having already heard it and been too busy trying not to freak out over the fact that Lorelai was currently sitting on his lap. There was a lack of space for all of them. Emily, Sirius, and James were on the couch, Lily, Marlene, and Dorcas on another, leaving Peter, Leslie, and Mary on the last one. Remus had pulled a single sofa they had found, meaning that was the only place for him and Lorelai. Yeah, give us a little credit. We're not that stupid, Emily jokes, making Sirius snort. Remus had noticed that his friend had taken a liking to Emily. He could understand why. Her brutal honesty and snarky remarks, keeping Sirius on his toes. Their personalities were so similar that he'd expected them to clash, but instead they were getting along really well. So what exactly is it that you're planning? Marlene asked curiously, leaning forward to look at Lorelai. With the blonde smiles, her eyes narrowing in mischief. His plan is to humiliate me, Lorelai muses, leaning back so that she was leaning against Remus's chest. His breath is caught off the back of his throat, and he can only hope she doesn't feel his heartbeat. He hesitates at first, but he slowly wraps his arm around his waist, and when she doesn't show any signs of minding, his hold on her tightens. So instead, I'll humiliate him. And how exactly do you plan on doing that? Remus adds, unconsciously resting his chin on her shoulder. She glances down at him with a warm smile, her eyes filled with emotion he doesn't quite recognize, but somehow can't get enough of. Well, since we're speeding up our plan, the last game of the last the Ravenclaw last game of the season, Emily muses, making James' eyebrows prick up. For me, the rematch against the Griffs? James asked curiously after having to cancel the last game due to the fact that L'Oreal had suffered an injury. A rematch was scheduled. If the Ravenclaws won, they'd go against the Slytherins in final. Otherwise, they'd settle with third place. Yep, he's kind of a heartthrob, Raven's most loved player. If something were to happen to him in the field, in which he ends up looking like the worst player ever, he'd lose his precious title of heartthrob. L'Oreal explains, and James smirks approvingly, liking the idea. Which would be a good opening for L'Oreal. She'll break up with him. Remus's breath hitches at Emily's words. Sure, at this rate, a breakup is inevitable. We never expected it so soon. That's when we'll start spreading a rumor. The only reason she kept him around was because of his position on the team, and now that his worth was nothing, there was no reason to keep him. Ouch, I like that. But I'm guessing that's not the end. Sirius hums, and Emily nods in confirmation. Please, that bastard dare talk bad about my best friend and then try to make her look like a bad person over my dead body. Emily huffs angrily, and L'Oreal shakes her head. The last part of our plan was kind of risky and was only added recently, L'Oreal says calmly before taking a deep breath. He won't back down after I break up with him, so I'll have to prove to him I've moved on publicly. That's risky. How are you planning on doing that? Lily asked, and L'Oreal clears her throat nervously. Fake relationship. We're still trying to find someone willing. Leslie says, and Remus's heart drops off the idea. Remus could do it, Sirius exclaims happily, making Remus's eyes widen, and L'Oreal gape at him. I mean, think about it. Martin obviously doesn't like Remus, so it would be great. Not to mention, you guys look like a couple right now. Dorcas smirks, making Remus let go of L'Oreal, and she straightens up, both getting flustered. This is a perfect plan, Mary says, and her eyes glistening as if she knew something that they didn't. Leslie and Emily smirk at each other, having a similar look in their eyes as Mary does. Leslie and Emily obviously knew who L'Oreal liked, and the others knew who Remus liked. But Remus likes someone else. I don't want to come in between them, L'Oreal says softly, and James tries not to burst into laughter, glancing down at the floor, avoiding their eyes. If I can be of help, I don't mind. I don't think she'll mind ever, Remus assures her, and Sirius snorts, shaking his head. What about the person you like? He won't mind. He definitely won't mind, she hums. And he chuckles softly, wrapping his arms around her, pulling her flesh against him. Well, that settles it. Laurie and Remus are officially going to fake date. Emily clasps her hands together, a satisfied look on her face. Remus and L'Oreal both blush. Remus felt overwhelmingly joyed. He knew that it wasn't really, and that soon. Just as soon as they got rid of Morgan, they would go back to just being friends. That wouldn't stop him from enjoying this opportunity. He wouldn't even have to pretend to like her. It would come naturally. And in all honesty, he couldn't wait to see the look on Martin's face as he'd walk away with L'Oreal. Chapter 18. October 25th, 1975. Quidditch Field. Remus watches patiently as she struggles to untie her shoes. He found it somewhat amusing that after 5 hours dominating the sky as she practiced, she would now struggle with the simple task of untying her own shoes. It reminded him that she wasn't perfect. No matter how much he lied to himself that she has her fair share of flaws, and the more time he spent with her, the more he realized. He accepted those flaws, learning to appreciate how easily how easily became impatient or her ability to get easily distracted. He wouldn't even consider them flaws in all honesty. They were just personality traits that made her who she is. And he grew to like her more with every passing day. With someone so skilled on the Quidditch field, I'd expect better, he says teasingly as he kneels in front of her, taking her foot and helping her untie her shoes. She smiles appreciatively. We can't all be good at everything, Realm. It wouldn't make talents meaningless. She points out and he chuckles. Her loving ability to always say the right thing. Oh, sorry. He loved her ability to always say the right thing. You're right, as always. He hums, pulling her shoe off and helping her put on her rubber shoes. The day I'm wrong will be the end of the world, she jokes, and he snorts before taking her practice shoes and standing up. Well, looking forward to that day, he muses, stretching out his hand for her to take. She smiles as he helps her up on her feet. You're being extremely chivalrous today, Remus. Are you trying to make me fall in love with you? She asks jokingly, and his breath hitches, but he smiles. Would that be so wrong? He asked, half joking, half being serious. Her cheeks turn a soft shade of pink, a smile forming on her lips. Careful, Lupin. I don't think that your mysterious girl would appreciate that, she muses, and he chuckles, shaking his head. He brings her hand, kissing her knuckle, causing her eyes to widen as her cheeks turn a deeper shade of pink. Don't worry about that, he assures her before dropping her hands in between them, and dropping their hands in between them without letting go. If you act like this with her, then she's bound to fall in love immediately. She breathes out, and a smirk forms on his lip. He moves to stand in front of her and looks down at her with a raised eyebrow. Are you falling in love? He asked. Remus watches her breath hitch, and her eyes widen. He chuckles softly at her bewildered expression as he straightens up. Why didn't you accept that I played the role of your fake boyfriend? Because, as Sirius mentioned, Martin hates you. So what better way to humiliate him by going for one person he dislikes? She hums, and he is somewhat disappointed by her answer, having hoped that there was more to her choice. Of course, there is also the fact that there is no one better for that role than you, Rem. You may not realize that, but I wouldn't trust anyone else for that role. I'm glad. He hums, trying to keep his calm demeanor as his heart beats faster than imaginable. He was over the moon just from her simple words. Come on, I'm starved, she exclaims, tugging him to follow her towards the castle. By the way, thank you for coming. It's a pleasure. If I can go to James' practices, why shouldn't I do the same for my future fake girlfriend? He asks rhetorically, as he lets go of her hand and wraps his arm over her shoulder. You're way too good at being flirtatious to be considered safe. I think I might have to take a few meters of distance, she says teasingly, taking a few steps ahead. He snorts, shaking his head at her. He wraps his arm around his waist from behind, pulling her back towards him. A squeal escapes her lips as he picks her up and both laugh, while he slowly spins them around. Their laughter dies down as they notice Martin coming across the court. Marius puts her down, but without letting her go. This is especially favorable to her plan. We're naturals. Just us acting ourselves is enough to piss him off. Lorelei snorts as he chuckles, just to add salt to the wound. He kisses her cheek, making her smile softly as she looks up at him. From any other angle, it looked like the two were about to kiss, but they both were afraid to make such a move. He wanted nothing more than to lean down and kiss her until he couldn't breathe anymore, but he knew better. After all, she was still in a relationship, and even if she was planning on breaking up with Martin, he wouldn't do that out of respect. He'd rather wait, and he would if he had to. He'd wait forever for her. That's a good thing, he hums as he lets go of her and takes her hand once again. Now let's get some food before you start. Yes, think Merlin. Practice really does work up an appetite, she groans, and he chuckles, shaking his head. Chapter 19. October 27th, 1975. Great Hall. Okay, are we officially inviting you three to our Halloween party this weekend? James says excitedly, making the three girls look at him curiously. Remus glances down at Lorelei, waiting impatiently for a response. I'm down. How about you, Laura? Leslie asked, not asking Emily, since it was a known fact that Emily would never say no to a party. Lorelei bites her lips in a thought. Do we dress up? Lorelei asks, and James nods in confirmation, making her grin. Count me in. We should have matching costumes, Lorelei suggests, making them all smile at the idea. I'm going as the devil, both serious, and Emily say, giving each other playful glares. I want to go as a witch, Leslie hums, and Peter frowns in thought. It was no secret that Peter had a feeling for Leslie, which happened to be repercuted. This is turning into couple matching rather than group matching, James points out, and Lorelei turns to Remus with a wide grin. What should we do? I'm thinking either gods or rock stars. She hums in thought, and he chuckles softly. He didn't mind what costumes he wore. The idea of matching with Lorelei was already good enough for him. Lorelei goes up as the moon goddess, and Remus goes up as a werewolf. In serious tease, making Remus glare at him for a joke. You go as the dog, and Emily as the bone, then, Remus retorts, and Lorelei raises an eyebrow, not understanding the joke. When James bursts into laughter, and Peter covers his mouth to stifle his own laughter. Actually, I have an idea. Really? Do share, Lorelei asked, her interest clearly having peaked. There is this famous Muggle couple that were criminals. We could dress up as them, Remus suggests, and Lorelei smiles approvingly. You'll help me pick the fitting outfit then, right? She asks excitedly, and he nods in agreement. She leans onto him, resting her head on his shoulder, causing his heartbeat to skyrocket. He couldn't get used to the idea of her being so close to him. Well, Rem, I have decided then. What about you, Peter? Leslie asks hopefully, and he smiles nervously. A wizard. He hums, and Leslie's smile widens. So do you think I should ask Leslie? James asks, and a deafening silence settles between them. Remus was debating on whether he should encourage his friend, knowing that the chances of success were low, or tell him in advance that his chances were low. I mean, if you want, Sirius says, breaking the silence after a while, clearly uncertain about it. I appreciate the support, James mumbles, making his friend smile sheepishly. Always a pleasure, Peter beams happily, making James playfully glare at him. Remus chuckles, glancing down at Lorelei, who is watching in amusement as his two friends get in a playful argument. He slips his hand into hers, interlocking their fingers. She softly squeezes his hand, making him smile and bring her hand up to his to kiss, bringing her hands up to his lip, kissing her knuckles. We could always go as queen in her knight, he muses, making her look up at him with a soft smile. How romantic, my knight in shiny armor. We could do that too. I'm not sure how we'd acquire those costumes and such short notice, though. We'd have more luck going as a bride and groom, she says teasingly, making his heart flutter as a soft blush rises to his cheeks. I think we missed a few steps prior to becoming newlyweds, he muses, and a giggle escapes her lips, shaking her head at him. True, you didn't propose, so that wouldn't be right, she hums. He shakes his head and slightly bumps shoulders with her, a giggle escaping her lips. Okay, so the party starts at 10 in Gryffindor Commons. One of us will come get you so that you guys can get in, James says, catching everyone's attention. Remus keeps hold of Lorelai's hand under the table, having their hands rest on her lap. Sounds like a plan. Won't McGonagall get mad? Leslie asks with wide eyes, and Sirius waves her off. She loves us. She never gets mad at us, Sirius assures, and Emily snorts. Who would love you, Sirius? Emily asks, joking, receiving a look from Sirius. I'll have you know, everyone loves me, Sirius says confidently, making Emily roll her eyes at him. This will be so fun. I genuinely can't wait, Peter exclaims, making Leslie giggle and shake her head. You're just going to black out about 20 minutes into the party, Remus points out. In Peter's house, Sirius snorts in amusement. Oh, you'll probably be high as a kite before the party starts, Peter retorts, making Peter give a look. That's what makes the party even more fun from being high from the beginning, Ray points out, making Remus's eyes widen slightly. Somehow, he didn't see her as the type to get high. Her delicate frame suggested made him think that she'd probably avoid such substance. As he had felt the same when he found out that she played Quidditch. She was much more petite and fragile looking compared to James, so he had never expected her to be captain of a team. Wait, hold on. Are you really about to go to a party and get high with a bunch of 16-year-olds? Emily asked, looking at her two friends, who also suddenly realized that they weren't all the same age. Even Remus had forgotten that the three girls were older than them, having bonded so well with them. I'm actually turning 17 in a few days, Sirius points out. Yeah, we are so about to do that. Gloria smarts, amused by the situation. Chapter 20. October 31st, 1975, Gryffindor Commons. Remus leans back against the wall, trying to pretend he was paying attention to what the other person's talking about. In reality, his eyes would ever so often drift to the door, waiting for Lorelai to walk in. It had been an hour already, yet no sign of a blonde girl or even her friends. He'd gone to her shared room with Emily and Leslie to pick out clothes that would work for their costume. He'd been sitting in the middle of her bed, legs crossed, while she rummaged for her clothes. He glances towards where he spotted Sirius, both making eye contact, and Sirius immediately knew what Remus was wondering. Shrugging in response, Remus lets out a huff in response and tries to go back to the conversation, but that doesn't last long. He notices a flash of blonde appear in the corner of his eyes. His head snaps in the direction of his smile stretches upon his lips. He excused himself for further conversation before making his way to Lorelai, who was looking around. As their eyes met, a smile forms on her blood-red lips as he staggers a little, and as he finally takes her in. A silk chiffon was loosely wrapped around her neck. Beige white barrette hung slightly sideways on her head. She wore a beige pencil skirt, which she wore a beige pencil skirt, which extended her every curve and And to top it off, she tugged in a smoothly long-sleeve ivory turtleneck. He hadn't even realized that he'd stopped breathing. His steps had flattened, his eyes widened, and that she was the one who walked up to him. In his eyes, she was beautiful at the time, as she had taken his breath right away now. "So, what do you think?" Lorelei asked, breaking him out of his trance. He takes a deep breath, blinking a few times to regain his composure, making her giggle. You look. He couldn't find the right word, no matter how much he thought about it. Not a single word he knew could describe how beautiful she looked. A soft blush tints her cheeks as she understands what he's trying to say, and her heart flutters. "You look handsome," she hums, and he smiles softly, feeling his heart skip a beat. He wore a gray suit, which he had found in the very back of his closet, and a black fedora, which he discarded at the very beginning, feeling absolutely ridiculous in it. "For a second, I thought you weren't coming anymore," he says honestly, and her smile drops. He frowns in worry as she slightly fixes his tie. "Martin tried to stop me from coming," she explains. Once she drops her hands back to his eyes, he can feel his anger boiling in his blood, and she notices, quickly shaking her head. "Don't. Let's not think about it. Let's just enjoy tonight to the fullest, please," she says softly, and he sighs, calming down for her sake. He smiles softly before taking her hand. "Come on, Sirius mentioned something about the never-ending supply of fire whiskey, so let's get wasted and forget all about your asshole boyfriend." Remus grins excitedly, making her laugh as she follows him through the crowd to where the bottles are. Remus grabs 2 cups, pouring an equal amount of liquid into each. He hands her one before taking his own. She taps the rim of her cup against his. "To an asshole boyfriend," she jokes, making him snort and shake his head. "To ones we really love," he says, and a soft smile forms on her lips. Without delaying any further, they throw their heads back, emptying the cups in one go. Lorelei clears her throat as she puts the cup down, trying to soothe the burning sensation of alcohol. "Did she come to the party?" she asks, and he knows who she means immediately. He chuckles and nods. "Did he come?" he asks, and she grins before glancing towards the pallet before looking back at him. "Dance with me and you'll find out." She smirks, and he rolls his eyes at her, but he lets her lead him to the dance floor. Both of them get lost in the music, laughing and spinning around together, letting go of any worry, forgetting about her asshole boyfriend who was waiting for her return, forgetting about their heart-aching feelings for each other. All that mattered right then and there was just them. From the side of the room, Sirius and James are watching with knowing smiles, leaning against the wall as Emily returns with a cup in her hand. She turns to look at what they're looking at and starts. "When do you think they'll realize they like each other?" Emily asks the 2 boys who shrug. Remus probably won't never realize until she tells him. For one of the smartest guys in Hogwarts, he can be very clueless. Sirius hums, bringing the cigarette back to his lips and letting out a soft puff of smoke. "And even if she realizes, she'll be too scared to make a move," Emily groans, making James sigh. "They're truly hopeless," James hums before his attention falls on the red-headed girl on the other side of the room. "Well, my destiny is calling. Bye." "Talk about hopeless," Emily snickers as they watch James run after the poor girl. Sirius chuckles softly, shaking his head. "To be young and in love," Sirius muses, glancing down at Emily, who looks up at him. She raises an eyebrow at him. "What?" "Nothing." He smirks, looking back where Remus and Lorelei are dancing. Chapter 21, 3rd of November, 1975, Courtyard. "Good afternoon, ladies." James jumps in front of the 3 girls, his 3 friends right behind. Hey boys, happy birthday, Sirius, Emily says, making Sirius beam happily as he stands next to James. Any plans for this special day? Lorelei asks, giving Remus a soft smile before looking at Sirius. The latter smirks, having already planned some mischief with his other friends for the day. Yes, this is why we are here. Would you like to join us on an adventure? Sirius asks, making the three girls give each other looks before looking back at the four boys. Remus was hoping that Lorelei would come so that he could finally spend some time with her outside of Hogwarts. Of course, today wasn't about him, but nevertheless, he truly wanted to spend more time with her. Yeah, absolutely, Emily says without hesitation, making Sirius smirk heavily. I guess missing one day of classes can't kill, Lorelei hums, making Leslie nod in agreement. The four boys smile happily, glad they were able to convince them to join. Can we at least drop our stuff back at our rooms? Leslie says, as she holds up her bag as a reminder that they still had them with them. It's okay, just a little detour. We're supposed to meet with Regulus, Marlene, and Dorcas anyway. They're joining us, James answers them as they slowly start to make their way towards Ravenclaw Tower. Remus moves to stand next to Lorelei. Let me carry this for you, he hums softly to her as he takes her bag, and she smiles up gratefully. Her warm smile makes his heart skip a beat, and he returns it. I'm glad you're joining us. Is that so? She asks teasingly, raising an eyebrow. He shows her lightly, a chuckle escaping his lips. Well, I'm glad you guys asked us. It'll be fun. It'll be like a quintuple date. Quintuple? What 5 couples are here? He looks at her in amusement, and she shrugs innocently. You and me, Emily and Sirius, Leslie and Peter, Dorcas and Marlene, and last but not least, Regulus and James. She lists off, making his smile widen. His heart skips a beat at her listing them as a couple, and he tries not to get overly excited at the thought. James and Regulus and James, a couple, Remus adds, his eyes widen in amusement as she nods in confirmation. James likes Lily, love, not Regulus. That's what he thinks, I'll prove it to you, she hums determinedly, a soft blush tainting her lips at him, tainting her cheeks at him calling her love. They soon reach a Ravenclaw Tower, and Emily takes all the bags before bringing them to their shared room. Okay, great. We're meeting the others by the Whomping Willow, James informs us 3 girls as soon as Emily returns. You trying to get us killed or what? Leslie asks with wide eyes, and Peter chuckles soft, shaking his head. Nope, it's just a good place to sneak out from, Peter explains to her, but she only frowns in slight worry. Lorelei looks at Remus questioningly, who shrugs, not giving away what they were planning. She shakes her head unconsciously, moving closer to him as she slips her hand in his. Remus pulls her even closer and kisses the crown of her forehead. Stop being so lovey-dovey, you two. Let's go, Sirius calls after them, having an arm wrapped around Emily's shoulder. Remus groans in annoyance at his best friend before pulling Lorelei to follow along with them. That's 1 couple out of 5. Lorelei points and he snarls. I never said Emily and Sirius weren't one. I just think they're testing waters for the time being, Remus states as she hums in agreement. Okay, you've got a point. Leslie and Peter are definitely too shy to make a move. Something is there, though, she says firmly, and he nods in agreement as they glance at the 2 mentioned. That leaves 3 couples. Dorcas and Marlene are obviously checked already since they are together. He reminds her, and she nods, making a mental note. Okay, so James and Regulus then, Lorelei says, and she says excitedly, and he chuckles, shaking his head in denial. No way, I don't believe. I would know if James was gay, Remus points out, and Lorelei shakes her head. That's where you're wrong. James is bi. She corrects them out as they walk out the castle towards the Whomping Willow. How could you possibly know that? Remus asks, making her smirk as they see the other 3 waiting for them at the tree. Watch and observe, Lupin, she says confidently as James walks up to Regulus, throwing an arm over his shoulder, rubbing his head with his fist. Regulus shoves James away, the older boy laughing as he rolls his eyes and smiles softly. No way. Remus gapes as he knows for a split second. Raylis looks at James the same way he looks at Lorelei. The blonde girl smirks in satisfaction. No, it was a trick of the light. Are you kidding me? It was so obvious. You can't deny it. Lorelei giggles, watching Remus shake his head in shock. I need more proof than that, Lore. Well, Remus says firmly, and she sighs. All right, fair enough. We have all day anyway. I'll prove it, she says, and he chuckles. It's on, darling. What about the last couple? Us. He asks teasingly, making her blush as she looks at where the others are. I'll prove that too, she says, before letting go of his hand and rushing to where their friends are. Remus is left behind, gaping at her, uncertain how to react. Remus, are you coming, or are you too busy catching flies with your mouth? Peter calls out for him, and he shakes his head, snapping himself out of a daze. Yeah, coming, Remus says as he makes his way to them, shoving Peter slightly for a comment about the flies. Chapter 22, 3rd of November, 1975, London. Can we please just stop for a moment? Lily gasps out as she stops, making the others halt and look at her. Lorelei leans against Remus as she tries to catch her breath. They'd been running for a while now after James decided it was a good idea to use a spell to cut off the pants of an unfortunate man on the streets. As the man stumbled after his pants fell to his feet, he turned around and looked at the laughing teenagers, and he started shouting in a state of panic. The group started running, afraid they'd get punished for it. What were you thinking, you bloody fool? Marlene scoffs at James, who smiles sheepishly and shrugs. I thought it was funny. Sirius hums, making the two boys high-five, and Rest look at them disapprovingly. Sirius, as long as you're doing something you shouldn't, you find it funny. So the bar is set low. Remus points out, and Sirius playfully shoves him. Reggie, don't be like that with your brother. I know you found it funny. James smirks as he throws an arm around the shoulders of the youngest Black. Whatever makes you feel better, Potter. Regulus mumbles, shaking his head at him. I think we've had enough excitement for today. Can we just do something a little calm now? Leslie asks, still out of breath as she leans on her knees. I saw this shopping center not far from here. We could go and do something there, Dorcas asks, making them all nod in agreement. So how are you enjoying your birthday trip so far? Sirius? Lorelei asks as she takes Remus's hand as they walk alongside Sirius and Emily. I love this. By far one of the best. Sirius beams, grinning from ear to ear. Remus chuckles, happy to see his friend so delighted, especially knowing how hard he'd had it before leaving his parents' house. Remus knew how much Sirius hated his parents, and when he chose to leave, it had been for the best. But he also knew that Sirius had hesitated because of his brother. There had been quite a downfall between the brothers when it first happened, but as time went by, they found their way back together. Now Sirius just kept pestering the boy about running away and coming to live with the Potters as well. Probably because you and James keep getting us in trouble. Emily chuckles softly, and Remus smirks as he looks down at her. Keyword being nearly. Sirius points out, making Emily roll her eyes at him. Remus and Lorelei watch in amazement as the two started bickering, making them fall a few steps back to avoid getting in between. I never thought I'd see Emily this happy, Lorelei hums before looking up at Remus, who was already looking at her. I can say the same for Remus. I can say the same for Sirius, he says, making her smile widen. She glances back ahead of them, and her smile quickly turns into a mischievous smirk. He looks in the direction she's looking. Oh my god, hold on. He looks in the direction she is and smiles appreciatively. James and Regulus would make a good couple too. If James stopped pinning Lily, and focused on one right in front of him. So you're finally accepting that I was right, Lorelei teases, making him shove her lightly. Fine, I accept defeat, he huffs, making her giggle. She suddenly stops walking, making oh fuck. She suddenly stops walking, making him do the same, and look at her in confusion. He raises an eyebrow as she watches the others walk away. What exactly are you doing? Just wait a second, she breathes out, and as soon as the others are out of sight, she looks at him with a soft smile. Don't worry, as soon as Leslie knows we're gone, they'll come back. I just wanted some alone time between us. But we could have waited till we get back. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love spending time alone with you, he says, slightly flustered, and a blush rises to her own cheeks. Well, I did say I'd prove everything by the end of the day, she hums, making his eyes widen in realization. His hurt increases as he gazes down at her. Don't get me wrong, there is Martin, and as much as I hate him for what he's done, out of pure respect, I can't do what I really want to do. And what exactly is that? Remus asks as she raises an eyebrow at him. Lupin, put one and one together. She chuckles. She chuckles softly, and he lets out a deep breath. He couldn't believe what he was hearing right now. She was basically admitting that she wanted to be more than friends. That she wanted what he'd wanted for so long. Well, for now, I just want you to know that I get it, me too, but don't say it. He cuts her off, and she looks at him in confusion. I just don't want you to tell me while you're still with him. I don't want you to tell me while we're celebrating Remus's birthday and we're in the middle of London. Then when? She asks breathlessly, and he smiles softly as he leans his forehead against hers, closing his eyes. I want to say it when it's just us two. Maybe while we're outside, looking into the sunset. I want it to be just us two. He hums, and she smiles softly, closing her eyes as well. Okay, I can live with that. She hums, making him chuckle as he opens his eyes. He brings his free hand up to his jaw, and she leans into the warmth of his palm. Good, I'm looking forward to it. He smiles, feeling overjoyed. He felt like this was a dream, like any moment he'd wake up and none of this would have happened. The feeling of her soft skin under his fingers made this real, more real than he could process. Hey, bloody hell! What are you still doing here? Their moments cut off as James and the others call out for them. Remus drops his hand as they look at the others who wave to them to join them. Shall we then? He asks as he looks down at her. She grins and nods. Chapter 23, 10th of November, 1975, Quidditch Field. You've been in a terribly good mood the past week, Sirius says as they make their way to a spot to sit, where they watch for a rematch between Ravenclaw and Gryffindors. I would say it's because of the beginning of the end of Martin and Lorelei's relationship, but you can't have been excited for this since last week. No, this is making me happier. If anything, this is the best moment. This is the beginning of the happiest moments of my life. Remus grins happily as he glances at his friends who look at him as he's lost his head. For today's match, they've been joined by Dorcas, Marlene, Leslie, Emily, Lily, and Regulus. Merlin Remus, I wasn't aware breakups made you this happy. Are you sadist by chance? Regulus asked, making Sirius snort in amusement. Remus gapes his head at the younger boy and shakes his head. No, I'm just happy we're finally getting rid of this horrible human being. Remus huffs as he takes a seat, and Emily smirks, an eyebrow raised questioningly. Oh, so it has nothing to do with the fact that you and Lorelei have been practically admitting to have feelings for each other. Emily asks teasingly, making Leslie hit her head, and Remus gets flustered as the other look at him in shock. Excuse me? What? Since when? Why did you not tell us? Remus, what kind of slander is this? Sirius asks in disbelief and a look of betrayal in his eyes. Remus rolls his eyes at his overly dramatic friend. It happened when we went to London, Remus admits, and he could see in Sirius's eyes thousands of questions flash at once. He knew that once they'd get back in the room and James heard of this, he'd get an earful. I'm so happy for you, Remus. Oh, this is wonderful. After so many years, Dorcas says excitedly, making Leslie and Emily look at Remus in shock. What does that mean? Leslie asked, making Remus wince. He didn't know that he liked Lorelei for so long, and Merlin only knew how they'd react once they found out. Nothing. She meant nothing. Remus chuckles nervously, but Emily gives him a look that clearly shows she doesn't believe him. He takes a deep breath and sighs in defeat. Fine, I've kind of liked Lorelei for 2 years. Are you serious? Emily gapes out. No, I am. Sirius smirks proudly, receiving a glare from Emily. That's so cute. Why didn't you not come to talk to her sooner? Leslie asks, a blush rising to his cheeks. Because he was shy. Sirius shrugs Remus lightly, who huffs in annoyance. Shut it, will you? It's starting. Remus grumbles as he glances at the field just in time to see the players fly in. You'll have to tell us everything when we get back, Remus, Sirius says sternly, making Remus let out a deep breath and nod in acceptance. Remus put his focus on the field where he sees the two teams already in position. He felt a little anxious about this game, knowing that what was at stake. If her plan was to embarrass Martin failed, everything would fall apart. The plan was simple: get Martin distracted enough that the Gryffindors would get past him to score. It didn't matter if Lorelei caught the snitch, as long as Martin failed to stop the Gryffindor team from scoring through the goalpost. It was going to be hard. Martin was one of the best keepers. Getting him to lose his focus will not work easily. Emily muses, seeming to be a little nervous for outcome. What exactly is the best plan? Does anyone actually know? Lily asked, glancing at the others for a bit. No, not really, Sirius admits, making Remus sigh. He trusted that Lorelei and James knew what they were doing, but it still made him nervous to not know what was going to happen. Okay, well that's reassuring, Marlene huffs as they all pay attention to the players as the game starts. Remus is unsure whether he should focus on James and Lorelei chasing the snitch or on what exactly was going to happen to Martin. It was all so overwhelming, and the shouting students trying to support their team wasn't making it any easier. Choosing to enjoy the game rather than stress, he puts his focus on Lorelei and James. He wondered how future games between Ravenclaw and Ravenclaw and Gryffindor would be when this was all over and he could call Lorelei his girl. His heart skipped a beat at the thought, his girl. How had things gotten to this point? How had what used to be just a mere dream become so now real? The more he thought about it, the harder it was for him to hold in happiness, and he smiled. Moody, you might want to see this, Sirius says, making Remus glance at him. Sirius was focused on something, and following the direction he was looking, Remus turns to see what had caught the boy's attention. His eyes widened as two Gryffindors flew full speed towards the keeper, with one bludger in hand and the other with a quaffle. It was clear what they were planning, and the oddest part was that there was no Ravenclaw player in sight to help. What the bloody hell? Remus breathes out and when with wide eyes, he watches as a Gryffindor player throws a bludger at Martin, while the other throws the quaffle off the goalpost. Too busy trying to dodge a bludger, Martin doesn't notice the quaffle fly past him through the highest hoop. Merlin's beard, why didn't no one help him out? Because the others are busy with the rest of the Gryffindor team. Peter points to where the others were. Remus then realized what they had planned. L'Oreal had purposely sabotaged her own team to make it easier for the Gryffindors to attack. He felt bad. He knew how much Quidditch mattered to L'Oreal, and knowing that she had to purposely ruin her game broke his heart. There's no way Ravenclaw team will win at this rate, even if Fleur gets the snitch. Sirius concludes, and Remus leans back in his seat. It was a sacrifice they had to make for this to work out, and he wondered if L'Oreal was okay with it. Chapter 24. 10th of November, 1975, Quidditch Field. Remus rushed down towards where the teams are gathering after the match. As Sirius had predicted, Ravenclaw had lost. Martin had not been able to stop a single quaffle from going through the goalpost. Gryffindor had won with 400 points, and Ravenclaw lost with 10 points. It had been a pathetic loss for lack of words. This bad of a loss had never happened with L'Oreal as captain. Sure, Ravenclaw didn't always win, but they had never been far behind. The group of friends rushed to where they saw both teams waiting. Remus could see the Gryffindors celebrating, except for James, who looked a little guilty as he talked with L'Oreal. From where he stood, it looked like L'Oreal was trying to reassure James to not feel bad about this game. As they got closer, the two captains turned to look at them and smiled softly at the group. "You okay, Laurie?" Remus asked softly, worry clearly etched on his face. She shrugged slightly in response. "It's gonna put us back a little in the final ranking, but we had a good game against the Slytherin and Hufflepuff teams, so I don't think it'll be too bad." L'Oreal hums calmly, and Remus sighs, feeling a little relieved to see her doing okay. "Okay, so what now?" Lily asked, making L'Oreal glance over at her shoulder at her team and takes a deep breath. "Now we get started. Will you hold this for me, please?" L'Oreal asked Remus if she can hold up her broom. He nods and takes it from her carefully. She smiles gratefully before she turns around and walks to her team. "Should we get closer?" Regulus asked, clearly curious as what they were going to talk about. Remus was just as curious as Regulus. "Just a little, so that we're not too obvious," Marlene says as she takes 2 steps closer, making the others do the same. "Let's add another 2, Dorcas says, and she takes 2 larger steps. Sirius snorts, slightly amused by this as they all do the same. From here, they could hear what L'Oreal was saying, while keeping a big enough distance. "We're going to have to work on techniques and positions at practice. We can't have this happen again," L'Oreal says to her team, who nods in understanding except for Martin, who seemed unhappy. "Or maybe we can do next time when we're struggling," Martin snaps, making the whole team gape at him. Remus clenches his jaw, trying not to jump in and give Martin a piece of his mind, knowing that she had something to handle. "Martin, she's a seeker. She's supposed to be going after a snitch. It was up to us to stop the other team," one of the beaters says, and Martin just simply scoffs. "Or maybe she purposely gave us this plan to sabotage us," Martin accuses her, and L'Oreal raises her eyebrows in disbelief. Obviously, that was the truth, but he wasn't supposed to know that. "Are you accusing the team captain of purposely sabotaging the team to lose?" L'Oreal asked in a dangerously calm manner. Chills ran down Remus's back at how cold she sounded. "That's insane, mate. She's by far one of the best captains this team has ever had." Chaser speaks up, making Martin shake his head. "She's been hanging out with a Gryffindor captain and his friends, especially Lupin." Martin snarls, causing L'Oreal to squint his eyes at him. Not only are you accusing me of sabotage, but now you're insinuating I'm cheating on you? Lorelei asks rhetorically and crosses her arms over her chest. Am I wrong? Martin asks, raising his chin up to look down at her. Remus looks at Lorelei and wonders what she could be thinking. Clearly, the rest of the team is uncomfortable. Their star captain and their star player is arguing. This was never a good sign. Harvey, do we know anyone who wants a position as keeper? Ours seems to have forgotten what respect is, Lorelei says after a while of silence. The chaser she addressed looks at her in slight shock. You wouldn't dare replace me, Martin says confidently, and she chuckles dryly. She takes a few steps forward and looks up at him, her eyes filled with cold rage. Watch me, she smirks before she turns around, walking towards where her friends are. Harvey, keep me updated on the new search for a new keeper. Got it. Harvey nods before he and the other team members walk away, leaving Martin behind. Lorelei walks up to Remus and takes her broom back. Let's go. There's nothing left to do here, she says, making him nod without even glancing at Martin. She walks away with her friends. Shall we celebrate the Gryffindor win? No way. Let's celebrate your freedom. James grins, making her chuckle. It was clear that James felt a little guilty about Gryffindor winning this way, but she didn't mind or care. As long as they could all put an end to this, and she could live with the loss. This is going to be an eventful few days, Emily says, making Lorelei snicker and nod in agreement. I bet. Chapter 25. 12th of November, 1975. Gryffindor Commons. Sirius had been able to see Lorelei since the game, and as much as he disliked the thought of it, he knew she was just trying to figure things out. He had to be patient and trust her, that's all. Yet he was still nervous about this all, whether it was a situation or perspective, or the image of them confessing their feelings. Alright, boys, on today's chapter of James Knows All the Gossip, guess what I just heard on my way here? James says excitedly as he walks up to Remus, Sirius following Till. Girls talking about how amazing you are, Remus asks sarcastically, making Sirius snort, and James rolls his eyes. No, you idiot. Martin and Lorelei have officially broken up, James answers, and Remus immediately straightens up, his eyes wide. He couldn't help the feeling of shock. Even though he knew this was going to happen, his heart was beating uncontrollably as he tried to put his thoughts together. Merlin's beard, Minnie. You look like you saw Dumbledore naked, Sirius says teasingly as he sits down across from a werewolf. He receives a glare for his remark. I just can't believe this is actually happening. I shouldn't be this happy. I mean, she broke up with her 2-year boyfriend, who was an absolute asshole. I really shouldn't be this happy, or should I? Remus breathes as a smile tugs at his lips, and he can't hold him with joy. He was an asshole, and she broke up with him. You most definitely have every right to be happy, especially because it's a step closer to you having a girlfriend. They grow up so fast. James sighs as he wipes a fake tear, and Remus rolls his eyes. It felt like yesterday when Remus was practically drooling at the sight of her on the Hogwarts Express, Peter says as he leans back in his chair and Sirius snickers. This calls for a celebration, Sirius says excitedly as he opens his bag and pulls out a bottle of fire whiskey. Remus snorts, not even surprised that Sirius pulled the bottle from his bag. Mate, how long have you had that? James asks in amusement while Peter goes and gets some glasses for them. Way too long. I've been waiting for the right moment. Anyone want to light up as well? Sirius asks as he pulls out a pack of cigarettes. Probably should head back to the room to avoid the smell, Remus says as he reaches out to a cigarette box Sirius is holding. Peter gets back with 4 goblets in hand, giving one to each and keeping one for himself. We should be fine, James assures him as he pulls out a lighter he always carried for some unknown reason. To what do we drink today, lads? Sirius asks as he pours the whiskey in everyone's goblet. Remus raises an eyebrows as he uses James's lighter to light up his cigarette before handing the lighter to Sirius. To the first of us to be in a relationship, Peter suggests, and Remus nods approvingly. Aren't you and Emily a thing? James asks Sirius, who shakes his head. Not officially. It's still testing waters, Sirius replies, getting the bottle down and easing his cup. The 3 other boys follow soon and grin. To Remus' future girlfriend. They might invite us to their wedding, Peter says teasingly, a blush rising to Remus' cheeks as he puts his cup down and brings his cigarette up to his lips. If he doesn't invite us, I'll fight him, James smirks as he takes a swig from his cup. Let's not go too ahead of ourselves. We're not officially together yet, Remus points out, and Sirius chuckles, letting a cloud of smoke escape to his lips. Keyword being yet, Mooney. Get a few weeks, you just need to wait a bit. So it doesn't look like she's rushing back into things, Sirius says as he leans back in his seat, using his free hand to untie his tie, letting it hang from his neck. The best thing to do for now is not to make it official for a while, so that rumors don't circulate. James adds on, making Sirius nod in agreement. But it wouldn't suck for Mooney since he has been wanting this relationship for years. Peter wonders, and Remus simply shrugs in response. Honestly, I don't mind us not making it officially immediately. I'm just glad that it's even happening. Remus says, honestly, throwing his head back to look at the ceiling smoke flying out of his head. You've got a bad mate. You must really like her. James hums, making Remus chuckle and softly and shrug nonchalantly. I do. I'd give her the world if I could, Remus says honestly, smiling softly. He was over the moon. He felt like nothing in the world could go wrong from now on. It should have been the moon. It would have been ironic, Sirius says jokingly, making Remus groan as James and Peter laugh at the lame attempt of a joke. You're very funny, Pads. Absolutely hilarious, Remus grumbles, and Sirius snickers. Proms and Wormtail would agree. Sirius points out, and Remus rolls his eyes, chuckling softly. Chapter 26. The 15th of November, 1975, the Great Hall. The moment he saw her walk into the Great Hall, he did not hesitate and walk right behind. He felt like it had been forever since he last saw her and couldn't wait any longer. Rushing after her, he quickly catches up with her and takes her hand, making her turn around and look up at him. Marlin's beard and you scared me, Lorelei breathes out, making him chuckle softly. I'm sorry, do you have a minute? He asked softly, and she smiled softly, nodding in response. He softly pulls her to follow him out of the Great Hall. Where are we going? She giggles, feeling a little giddy, like a child as they walk through the halls, passed by other students. Here, he hums, pulling her into a small hallway. No one else in sight, he leans against her and pulls her into his arms. He buries her face into her shoulder and holds her tightly. What's gotten into you today, Rem? I'm not complaining, she giggles, making him hold her tighter as she wraps her arms around his neck. I've missed you, he admits, making her smile happily. Remus wondered if she could feel her heart increasing with every passing moment. "Aw, I've missed you too," she hums, causing him to pull away to look down at her with a wide grin. "How are you?" he asks, making her shrug as she looks up at the ceiling, trying to think of an answer. "Like the happiest person ever right now," she says honestly, and his heart skips a beat, and he takes in a deep breath. "How about you? Full moon's in 4 days, you must be on edge." "Right now, nothing else in the world matters," he says, making her snort and playfully hit him. I didn't know you could be cheesy," she says teasingly, making him chuckle. He raises one hand to tug a strand of her hair behind her ear, and cupping her jaw, rubbing his thumb on her cheek. "For you, always," he hums, and a blush rises to her cheeks. His eyes trail down to her lips, and he can hear her breath hitch, making him look back up. He leans forward, resting his head against hers. "Really want to kiss you right now." "What's stopping you?" she breathes out, making him look at her, trying to find any sign of reluctance, but he sees none. Slowly, he leans closer, giving her a chance to pull away, but when she doesn't, he doesn't hesitate to press his lips against hers. Her finger slips into his hair, pulling him closer. His arms slip around her waist, tugging her tight against him. Everything seems to stop everything seems to stop as the only thing he can think of is the feeling of her lips pressed against him. A sudden movement next to them makes them jump apart. L'Oreal leans against the opposite wall and tries to catch her breath. Remus tugs a finger into his tie, slightly pulling it so that it loosens up. They quickly realize. Remus tugs a finger into his tie, slightly pulling it so that it loosens up. They quickly realize that the moment they had been having enough. The movement that they heard had been nothing, and both start laughing. "Merlin's beard, I thought someone was," she starts, but he cuts her off. "I know," he chuckles, making her smile happily. "I'm sorry. You probably wish you didn't have to sneak around like this," she says, and he shakes his head, pushing himself off a wall and walking up to her. "I don't really care if the world knows or if it's just us two. All that matters to me is that I can do this," he hums, before leaning and reconnecting their lips, making her smile happily. "You're very charming, Lupin," she hums against his lips, making him chuckle as he leans his forward against hers. "I guess no more clues about your mystery girl." "Well, I can give you one. She is a great kisser," he says, and she snorts, shoving him away, making him chuckle and shake his head. She also gets really flustered. "Shut it, will you?" She grumbles, using her hair to hide her burning cheeks. He smiles happily, looking down at her with a loving gaze. "I wonder how your mystery boy would feel about this," he teases, and she groans, covering her face with her hands. "I hate you," she mumbles, making him chuckle and pry her hands off her face. He brings up one of her hands and kisses her knuckles. "No, you don't." He smirks against her skin, making her huff as he drops her hand. "You're lucky I don't," she jokes, and he pulls her closer again. "Damn right I am," he says firmly before kissing her again. "I promise we won't have to hide for long," she says as she wraps her arms around his neck, and he smiles again. "I know, darling, I trust you," he reassures her, and she beams happily. "And maybe after a full moon we could go up to the astronomy tower and watch the moon," she suggests, and he grins as he remembers the promise they made to each other in London. "It's a date." "Absolutely," she giggles, pecking his lips one last time. We should probably head back. We should, but we don't have to, he points out, causing her to snort and shake her head. You absolute dog, stop it, she says, making him raise an eyebrow. I'm actually a werewolf, he reminds her, receiving a playful glare in return. Very funny, Lupin, she says sarcastically, although a smile is evident on her face. Epilogue. 12th of October, 1978, platform 9 3/4. Lorelei pushes through the crowd of parents as she rushes to find her friends. She hadn't seen them in over 3 months, and she couldn't wait to see them again. After graduating Hogwarts last year, she wasn't able to see them as much as she used to, especially as she was starting her research in alchemy. She notices a group stepping out of a Hogwarts Express, and she smiles as she recognizes them. She runs into their direction, catching the attention of the oldest, who lets his friends know that she was there. Remus turns around to face her and smiles happily, opening his arms for her as she runs into them, wrapping her arms around his neck. She pulls him down for a kiss. He stumbles back a little, but smiles happily against her lips as he kisses back. Congratulations on graduating. She grins happily as she pulls back, and he chuckles softly, smiling at her happily. Thank you, my love, he hums as she kisses her forehead. Their moment is interrupted by someone clearing their throat, and they turn around to face the group. Do we get a kiss and congratulations? Sirius asks with a smirk, and Lorelei hits him playfully. Go ask your girlfriend. Oh, I forgot, you broke up. Again, Lorelei says, and Sirius glares at her playfully. She shakes her head at him. Sirius and Emily had been in an on and off relationship for nearly a year now, having broken up 3 times and gotten back together every time. How's Leslie? Peter asks excitedly, and Lorelei smiles. Leslie and Peter got together during the summer after their graduation. Unfortunately, at the end of the summer, they had to do a long-distance relationship because Leslie was offered a job in France as an artist. She's doing fine. She wished she could be here, Lorelei says, and Peter beams happily. Congrats on graduating to everyone. I was worried you caused too much mischief and wouldn't be able to graduate. Very funny, Laura. I'll have you know that last year you used to be part of this, James says, and James says pointedly, and she sticks her tongue out at him. Regulus rolls his eyes at James, an amused smile on his lips. James still hadn't admitted that he liked Regulus, but at least he stopped pinning after Lily, which Lorelei considered progress. The summer will be absolutely crazy, Sirius says excitedly, and Lorelei shakes her head looking up at Remus. What do you want to do? She asked him softly while the others start discussing summer plans. Remus looks up and smiles happily. I want to go home with my beautiful girlfriend and just enjoy every minute with her. He hums, making her bite her lip as her heart skips a beat. Even after nearly 3 years, he was able to make her feel all giddy and happy. It hadn't been easy at first, especially with Martin. They had succeeded in their plan, but they had to keep their relationship a secret for a while, and when they finally became public, Martin didn't stop tormenting them and trying to create doubt about them being together. He even nearly succeeded in making them break up, but in the end, it only made their relationship stronger. I like that idea. Okay, I'll cook dinner, she hums, and he beams, leaning down to kiss her. I love you. He hums against her lips, and her smile turns into a wide grin. I love you too, she says back, pecking his lips again, and he turns head to look at the others, who are all in a heated discussion about their summer plan. Remus lets out a breath as he smiles down at her, pulling her closer to him. He couldn't believe that 5 years ago, he was sitting on the Hogwarts Express and had seen her for the first time. Since seeing her that time, he had only been able to dream of even talking to her. 2 years later, His dreams had become a reality. There's nothing in the world he would change right now, and he couldn't be more happy than he is with her by his side. Okay, that was the entire thing. I actually loved reading that. It was amazing. It was so fun to read. Uh, I loved reading it. It was interesting. It was an interesting story, really. It was. Um, yeah, I think I'm definitely gonna have a link in the description. Don't worry. Um, this is really good. Uh, you know, I would advise you check it out because this is amazing. One of the best Harry Potter things I've read. Which there's a second thing I want to read. And I'll tell you kind of about the main story of it. Just so that you have an idea of it and tell me if you like the idea. Um, so basically, instead of leaving Harry at the doorstep, like of a Dursley's, um, Snape had decided to take him in and raise him in Hogwarts, and it's kind of him living there. It's a short one, it's only 17 parts, but I've read it twice, and it's really good. So yeah. But thank you for listening. Yeah, this was just fun to make, and I think I'm gonna be doing Heat Waves next, or Passerine. I'm so sorry for pronouncing that wrong. Um, I think I might do Passerine. I'm so sorry for pronouncing that wrong. I know I am. Because I'm gonna do something. I'm gonna take a break from ships because that was 2 ships. But yeah. If you have anything else you want to suggest from any fandom, I really don't care. Um, Harry Potter, FNAF, even My Hero Academia, anything. I don't care. I'm not really into anime, but I will find what you guys want. But I will not do anything that becomes dirty. And if you ask for like an X reader thing, um, I would need to read it before, make sure there's nothing dirty, and make sure there's nothing that makes me uncomfortable to read. So yeah, please bear with me on this. I haven't done this before. I don't read to people. I've always been nervous about it. So yeah. Uh, yeah. Anyway, have a good day or night wherever you are. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what to say. Okay, bye. Thank you for listening. Thank you so much. Bye, my beautiful readers. Yeah.